There is a specific kind of silence that follows a firefight. It's not an empty silence. It's heavy, ringing, thick with the smell of cordite and the copper tang of blood. Amanda Brooks knew that silence intimately. She had worn it like a second skin through 3 combat tours in Kandahar and 2 classified deployments she would take to her grave. But the silence sitting in her suburban kitchen in upstate New York was different. It was the suffocating, dusty silence of a 20-year-old ghost. "Mom, you're burning the toast." The voice, light and melodic, sliced through the memory like a scalpel. Amanda blinked, the harsh desert sun of her nightmares fading into the soft, overcast morning light filtering through the window over the sink. She looked down. Smoke was curling from the toaster. "Copy that, Bug," Amanda said, her voice raspy. She swiftly popped the lever, catching the blackened squares of bread before the smoke detector could compromise their morning perimeter. She tossed them into the trash in one fluid motion and turned to look at her daughter. Sophie Brooks was 8 years old. A whirlwind of missing front teeth, scraped knees, and a ferocious intellect that terrified Amanda on a daily basis. Right now, Sophie was sitting at the kitchen island, meticulously coloring a fiercely anatomical T-Rex. She had her mother's piercing hazel eyes, eyes that didn't just look, but observed. "I wasn't burning it," Amanda deflected smoothly, grabbing 2 fresh slices. "I was tactically charring it. Builds character." Sophie didn't look up from her dinosaur. "Grammar says tactically charring things is why you're single." Amanda let out a huff of laughter, the tight knot in her chest loosening just a fraction. Grammar needs to focus on her bingo game. She poured herself a black coffee, the mug feeling warm and grounding in her scarred hand. Life was quiet now, predictable, safe. That was the mission objective when she left the service. Provide a secure, stable operational environment for Sophie. No more IEDs. No more night vision goggles. No more losing people she loved. But the universe, Amanda had learned, had a sick sense of humor. The rumble of the mail truck pulling away from the curb broke the suburban quiet. Amanda ruffled Sophie's hair, dodging a half-hearted swat from the 8-year-old, and walked out the front door into the crisp autumn air. The leaves in Elmwood were turning violent shades of red and gold, masking the town's deep-rooted secrets under a blanket of New England charm. Amanda opened the metal mailbox. Bills, a catalog for tactical gear she hadn't unsubscribed from, and a padded manila envelope. Her military training, ingrained so deep it was cellular, kicked in instantly. Observe, the envelope was old, not just weathered by the mail system, but genuinely aged. The paper was yellowing at the edges. Orient. There was no return address. The postage stamps were not modern printed labels, but actual lick and stick stamps. A quick glance at the postmark made her blood run cold. It was smudged, but the date was legible, October 14, 2006. 20 years ago. Exactly 20 years ago to the day. Amanda's breath hitched. She didn't open it immediately. She weighed it in her hand. Less than 2 ounces. No wires. No uneven bulk suggestive of an explosive. No chemical smell. It was just a small object. But to Amanda, it felt heavier than a rucksack loaded with ammunition. She walked back inside, locked the deadbolt, and slid the secondary chain into place, a habit she never broke. "Is that a present?" Sophie asked, eyeing the package. "No, sweetie. Just junk mail." Amanda lied smoothly. "Hey, why don't you go grab your backpack? Bus is going to be here in 10. Once Sophie's footsteps echoed up the stairs. Amanda retrieved a pair of latex gloves from the first aid kit in the pantry. You don't survive a decade in military intelligence without learning how to handle potential evidence. She placed the envelope on the sterile steel surface of the kitchen counter. Taking a paring knife, she carefully slit the top, avoiding the adhesive flap just in case there was trace DNA. She tipped the envelope. A small object slid out with a metallic clink against the steel. The air vanished from Amanda's lungs. The kitchen spun, the walls violently contracting. She gripped the edge of the counter, her knuckles turning white, fighting the sudden, overwhelming wave of nausea. It was a necklace. Specifically, half of a cheap, silver-plated heart. Etched into the tarnished metal were 3 letters, Fry. Amanda's left hand trembled as she reached to her own throat. Underneath her t-shirt, resting against her collarbone, hung the exact match. The other half. End. Chloe. Amanda whispered, the name tearing out of her throat like barbed wire. 20 years ago, 12-year-old Chloe Evans had ridden her blue Schwinn bicycle down to the creek at the edge of town. She had promised to meet Amanda there to look for bullfrogs. Amanda had been 10 minutes late because her mother had made her finish her math homework. When Amanda arrived, the bicycle was there, lying in the dirt, the front wheel still lazily spinning. But Chloe was gone. The police called it a runaway case at first. Then, a kidnapping. Finally, a cold case. The town grieved, moved on, and buried the memory. But Amanda never did. The guilt of those 10 minutes had forged her into the weapon she became. She joined the military not out of patriotism, but out of a desperate need to learn how to track, how to hunt, and how to protect. She had spent her entire adult life hunting bad men in foreign lands. All because she hadn't been there to protect her best friend in her own backyard. And now, Chloe's half of the necklace was sitting on her kitchen counter. Decide. Panic is a civilian luxury. Amanda forced the emotion down into a dark, reinforced box in her mind. Slamming the lid shut, she closed her eyes, took a deep tactical breath, in for 4 seconds. Hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4. Her heart rate stabilized. The grieving child vanished, replaced by the seasoned operator. She analyzed the anomaly. Why today? Anniversaries are psychologically significant to predators. They relish the memory. But this wasn't just a taunt, it was a deliberate breach of her perimeter. The postmark was from 2006, meaning this envelope had been kept somewhere for 2 decades. Or it had been lost in the mail system and magically surfaced today. The latter was a statistical impossibility. Someone had held onto this. Someone knew she was back in town. Someone was watching her. Amanda's eyes snapped toward the window. The street was quiet, too quiet. She scanned the sight lines. The neighbor's oak tree provided cover. The electrical box down the street was a perfect blind spot. Then, she saw it. A dark gray sedan, parked 3 houses down, facing her driveway. It had no front license plate, legal in some states. But not in New York. The windows were tinted too dark for factory standard. The engine wasn't running, but the faint wisps of exhaust in the cold morning air indicated it had been recently turned off. Mom, I can't find my math book. Sophie yelled from upstairs. Coming. Bug. Amanda called back, never taking her eyes off the gray sedan. She moved quickly. She grabbed a small Ziploc bag, scooped the necklace and the envelope into it, and shoved it into her pocket. She walked to the hallway closet, reaching up to the top shelf. Hidden behind winter blankets was a biometric lockbox. She pressed her thumb to the scanner. The box hissed open, revealing a matte black Glock 19, an extra magazine, and a tactical flashlight. She racked the slide, chambering a round with a satisfying, deadly click, and tucked the weapon into the concealed holster at the small of her back. The police had failed Chloe 20 years ago. They had treated the crime scene like a playground, trampled the evidence, and asked the wrong questions. They looked for a monster in the shadows. But Amanda knew better. Monsters didn't hide in shadows. They hid in plain sight. They went to church. They mowed their lawns. And they waited. But this monster had made a fatal miscalculation. He thought he was taunting a traumatized victim. He didn't realize he had just sent coordinates to a highly trained predator. Amanda walked to the bottom of the stairs. Her posture perfectly straight. The ghost of her past now fuel for the fire in her eyes. "Sophie," Amanda said, her voice dropping an octave, slipping into a calm, authoritative tone that brooked no argument. "Change of plans. We're not taking the bus today." Sophie appeared at the top of the stairs. Her backpack slung over one shoulder. Her brow furrowed. "Why? Is everything okay?" Amanda offered her daughter a tight, reassuring smile, though her eyes remained entirely cold. "Everything is perfectly fine, sweetie, but Mommy has to go to work." "I thought you retired from the army?" "I did," Amanda replied, her hand instinctively brushing the cold steel hidden beneath her shirt. She looked back toward the window, her mind already running probability algorithms, threat assessments, and establishing a kill box. "But I just got drafted for one last mission. And it's time to bring Aunt Chloe home." The walk from the front porch to the driveway was exactly 42 steps. Under normal circumstances, it took Amanda 20 seconds. Today, every single second stretched into an eternity. She held Sophie's small, warm hand in her left, keeping her right hand free, hovering just inches from the concealed draw of her Glock. Her eyes behind dark aviator sunglasses swept the street in a rapid, systematic grid. Sector 1. Clear. Sector 2. The gray sedan. It sat there, unmoving, like a shark resting in shallow water. "Mom, you're squeezing my hand too tight," Sophie mumbled, adjusting her oversized backpack. "Sorry, bug. Just practicing my grip strength." Amanda lied effortlessly, loosening her hold but pulling Sophie a half-step closer to her side, shielding the girl with her own body. "Get in the truck. Buckle up. Fast." Amanda's vehicle wasn't a standard suburban soccer mom SUV. It was a 2018 Chevy Tahoe. Heavily modified. She had bought it at a government surplus auction and spent 3 months ripping out the interior, reinforcing the side panels with Kevlar inserts, and upgrading the suspension. It had run flat tires and a V8 engine that purred with suppressed violence. As soon as the heavy doors slammed shut, enclosing them in a steel cage, Amanda hit the central lock. She jammed the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life. She didn't look directly at the gray sedan as she backed out of the driveway. Instead, she used the reflection of the side mirrors, watching the vehicle's exhaust pipe. As the Tahoe's tires hit the asphalt of the main road, a thick puff of white smoke bloomed from the back of the sedan. The engine had turned over. He was moving. Amanda's heart rate stayed unnervingly steady at 60 beats per minute. "Ice in the veins," her old drill sergeant used to say. "Panic gets you killed. Math keeps you alive." She needed to confirm the tale. In the intelligence community, It was called a SDR, a surveillance detection route. You never assume you're being followed. But you never assume you aren't. All right, Sophie, Amanda said, her voice light, projecting a calm she didn't feel. We're going to play the navigator game. I need you to count the red cars for me. Every time you see one, call it out. Even parked ones? Sophie asked, immediately distracted from the sudden change in their morning routine. Especially parked ones. Keep your eyes out the window. With Sophie's attention safely diverted, Amanda went to work. Elmwood was a grid of sleepy residential streets feeding into a busy main arterial. She took a sharp right turn onto Maple Avenue, an unnecessary detour for her usual route to Sophie's elementary school. She checked the rearview mirror. 3 cars back, a blue Honda, a delivery van, and the gray sedan. One, Sophie shouted, pointing at a parked Toyota. Good eye, Bug. Amanda accelerated, creating distance, then took a sudden, unsignaled left turn onto a narrow, tree-lined street. The delivery van went straight. The blue Honda honked in protest but kept going. 10 seconds later, the gray sedan rounded the corner, slipping into the street behind her. Confirmed. The math was done. 3 consecutive, illogical turns. The tail was locked on. Adrenaline finally spiked, cold and sharp. Whoever was in that car had crossed a line. You do not bring a war to a mother's doorstep. You do not involve the child. Mom, why are we going this way? Sophie asked, a hint of confusion creeping into her voice. School is the other way. We're making a pit stop, Amanda said. She needed to stash the package. She couldn't fight a war with an 8-year-old in the crossfire. Amanda's mind flipped through her mental Rolodex of local assets. There was only one person in a 50-mile radius she trusted with Sophie's life. Marcus Vance, former Marine Force recon, heavily scarred, functionally antisocial, and the owner of a custom auto shop on the industrial outskirts of town. He also owed Amanda his life after a messy extraction in the Quarengal Valley. Amanda checked the mirror again. The sedan was maintaining a professional distance. 2 car lengths. The driver was good, but he was playing by the textbook. Amanda was about to throw the textbook out the window. Hold on, Bug. Mommy's going to practice a driving maneuver. Before Sophie could ask what that meant, Amanda slammed her foot on the brake and ripped the steering wheel hard to the right. The Tahoe's heavy frame groaned as the tires shrieked against the pavement. She threw the heavy vehicle into a narrow, unpaved service alley between 2 brick storefronts, a gap barely wide enough for the side mirrors. Garbage cans exploded outward as the Tahoe plowed through them. Whoa, Sophie yelped, grabbing the "oh shit" handle above the door, her eyes wide not with fear, but exhilaration. Amanda didn't check the mirror. She knew the sedan couldn't make that turn at that speed without bottoming out or crashing into the brickwork. She floored the gas pedal, the V8 engine screaming as they tore down the alley, kicking up a storm of gravel and trash. She burst out the other side onto a parallel avenue, instantly blending into the heavy morning commuter traffic. She took 3 more randomized turns, weaving through side streets and commercial zones, eyes darting between the mirrors and the road ahead. The gray sedan was gone, lost in the dust. 10 minutes later, Amanda pulled the Tahoe up to a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. A faded metal sign read, "Vance Custom Auto and Salvage." She honked the horn twice, a specific, staccato rhythm. A moment later, one of the massive corrugated metal garage doors rumbled upward. A mountain of a man stepped out, wiping grease from his massive hands with a red rag. Marcus Vance looked like a Viking who had decided to take up mechanics. Sporting a thick, untamed beard and arms covered in faded tactical tattoos. Amanda rolled down the window. Marcus. Marcus took one look at her face. He didn't smile. He didn't ask how she was. He saw the shift in her eyes, the specific, dead calm stare that meant the safety was off. "Who is it?" Marcus asked, his voice a deep, gravelly rumble. "Don't know yet. A ghost from 20 years ago. They dropped a marker in my mailbox and put a tail on my house." Amanda turned to look at her daughter. "Sophie, grab your backpack. You're going to hang out with Uncle Marcus today." "But I have a spelling test," Sophie protested. "You're an A- student. You'll survive missing one," Amanda said, her tone leaving zero room for negotiation. She unbuckled her seatbelt and stepped out of the truck, walking around to open Sophie's door. Marcus stepped forward, placing a massive, protective hand on Sophie's shoulder as she hopped out. "We've got a new litter of barn kittens in the back office. Kiddo, you can help me name him." Sophie's eyes immediately lit up. "The spelling test forgotten. Really?" "Really," Marcus said. He looked over Sophie's head, locking eyes with Amanda. The silent communication between two combat veterans spoke volumes. "Is she a target?" his eyes asked. "Yes," Amanda's expression answered. "I've got her." Marcus nodded slightly. "Lock down the perimeter. Nobody gets in. Stay in the back room." "Bug," Amanda said, kneeling down so she was eye level with her daughter. She pulled Sophie into a tight hug, breathing in the scent of strawberry shampoo. It was her anchor, her reason to breathe. "Be good for Marcus. I'll be back to pick you up before dinner." "Okay, Mom. Love you. Love you more." Amanda stood up. The maternal warmth vanished from her face the second she turned back to the Tahoe. She walked to the trunk, popped it open, and pulled up a false floorboard. Underneath lay a locked Pelican case. She keyed the combination. Inside was her operational kit, a secure satellite burner phone, a set of lockpicks, flex cuffs, and a combat knife she had carried through hell and back. She strapped the knife to her ankle, slipped the burner phone into her jacket, and slammed the trunk shut. She walked back to the driver's side. "Amanda," Marcus called out before she could close the door. "You need backup?" Amanda paused, her hand gripping the steering wheel. She thought about the half-heart necklace burning a hole in her pocket. She thought about 12-year-old Chloe, and the monster who had taken her. "No," Amanda said, her voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "This is my backyard, and it's hunting season." She threw the Tahoe into reverse, the tires kicking up dirt as she peeled out of the salvage yard. She had successfully hidden her daughter. Now, she was going to find the gray sedan. She wasn't just going to lose her tail. She was going to catch him, break him, and find out exactly what happened 20 years ago. There is a fundamental rule in tracking. A hunter who loses their prey will inevitably return to the last known point of contact. Or they will seek high ground to reacquire the target. Amanda banked on the latter. The driver of the gray sedan was a professional. But he wasn't top tier. A Tier 1 operator wouldn't have burned his engine oil, creating that puff of white smoke that gave away his start. He was a contractor, a hired gun or a private investigator. And contractors in a small town like Elmwood had limited options for a vantage point. She bypassed her own neighborhood entirely. Instead, she navigated the Tahoe up the winding, two-lane road toward the old municipal water tower. It sat on a wooded ridge overlooking the eastern grid of Elmwood, offering a clear line of sight to the main arterial roads and, more importantly, the roof of Amanda's house. A mile from the summit, Amanda pulled the Tahoe off the pavement, hiding its massive frame behind a dense thicket of overgrown blackberry bushes and autumn-scorched oak trees. She killed the engine. The silence of the woods rushed in, broken only by the cawing of a distant crow. She stepped out, the air crisp and biting. She didn't slam the door, she pressed it shut until the latch clicked softly. Amanda moved through the woods not like a hiker, but like a ghost. Her boots, soft-soled tactical Merrells, found the patches of damp earth. Avoiding the dry, crunchy leaves, she kept her silhouette broken against the tree trunks, moving heel to toe, her breathing slow and measured. The mother who had been making toast 30 minutes ago was completely gone. The operator had taken the wheel. Through the thinning tree line, the gravel clearing beneath the water tower came into view. And there it was, the gray sedan. It was parked facing the valley, the engine off to avoid thermal detection, but the driver's side window was cracked an inch to let out cigarette smoke. Amanda paused behind a thick pine tree, 50 yards out, conducting a rapid threat assessment. One occupant in the driver's seat, male, heavy-set, resting his arm on the doorframe. No visible movement in the passenger or back seats. The suspension of the car wasn't riding low, meaning there was no heavy equipment or extra bodies in the trunk. He was relaxed, complacent. He thought he had lost a terrified suburban mother. He didn't know he was sitting in a kill box. Amanda drew her Glock 19. She didn't approach from the rear, mirrors could catch movement. She didn't approach from the front. She moved in a wide arc, coming up on the vehicle's rear passenger side quarter. The blindest of blind spots. 10 yards. 5, 3. She could smell the cheap tobacco and stale coffee now. She could hear the faint, tinny sound of a sports radio broadcast playing from the car's stereo. Amanda didn't hesitate. Violence of action is the key to an ambush. She stepped out of the blind spot, grabbed the handle of the rear passenger door, and yanked it open. It was unlocked, a rookie mistake. Before the man in the driver's seat could even process the sound, Amanda had lunged into the back seat. She drove her left forearm violently into the back of his neck, pinning his face against the steering wheel. The car horn blared, a short, loud honk, before his cheek slid off it, pressing against the dashboard. Simultaneously, she jammed the cold, steel muzzle of the Glock directly into the soft spot behind his right ear. Hands off the wheel, palms flat on the ceiling. Now, Amanda whispered. Her voice was barely a breath, but it carried the chilling promise of a hollow-point bullet. The man froze, letting out a pathetic, strangled squeak. His cigarette dropped into his lap, burning a hole in his cheap slacks. But he didn't dare move to brush it off. Trembling, he raised both hands, pressing his palms against the fabric of the car roof. "Who are you?" he stammered, his voice thick with panic and a heavy Brooklyn accent. "Lady, you're making a huge mistake. The only mistake made today was putting a tail on my daughter," Amanda said smoothly. With her free hand, she patted down his jacket pockets, extracting a snub-nosed .38 revolver, a wallet, and a burner smartphone. She tossed the gun out the open door into the dirt. She flipped open the wallet with one hand, her eyes scanning the driver's license. "Vincent Rossi, private investigator out of Albany. You're a long way from home." "Vince. I'm just doing a job." I swear to God, Rossi gasped, struggling to breathe against the pressure of her forearm. And doing it poorly. Amanda noted. Who hired you? I don't know. I swear. It was anonymous. Through an encrypted app. Signal. Amanda pressed the barrel of the Glock a millimeter harder into his skull. Vince, I spent 3 years interrogating insurgents who would rather blow themselves up than talk. Do you really want to play the "I don't know" game with me? I'm telling the truth, Rossi whined, sweat beading on his forehead. They paid in Monero. Untraceable crypto. 10 grand up front. 10 when I delivered the package to your mailbox and confirmed you opened it. Amanda's heart skipped a beat, though her grip remained ironclad. The package. The necklace. Did you look inside the envelope? No, I don't ask questions. They mailed the package to a P.O. box in Albany. My instructions were to drive it down here. Drop it at exactly 7:30 a.m. And watch your reaction. They mailed it. That meant there was a paper trail. However thin. Open the encrypted app, Amanda commanded, her tone leaving absolutely no room for hesitation. Rossi swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing against his throat. He tapped a black icon on the screen, Signal. The interface loaded, revealing a shockingly empty inbox. There was only one active conversation thread. The contact name was a single, ominous letter. X. Amanda leaned closer, keeping the Glock firmly pressed against Rossi's temple, and scanned the brief. Sterile exchange. X. Pickup package at Albany USPS. Box 409. Delivered to 42 Elmwood Drive. Observed target's reaction. Rossi. Confirming receipt of first half of payment. En route. Who is X? Amanda asked. I told you. I don't know. Rossi's voice cracked in a high-pitched whine. It's completely anonymous. They found me on a dark web forum for freelance fixers. They just gave me the tracking number for the P.O. box key and sent the crypto. That's it. Amanda's eyes narrowed. She memorized the P.O. box number, Albany USPS. Box 409. It wasn't much, but it was a digital crumb. A starting point. She slipped Rossi's burner phone into her own tactical jacket. With swift, practiced movements that spoke of years of muscle memory, she holstered her weapon at the small of her back. In the same fluid motion, she produced 2 heavy-duty, industrial zip ties from her pocket. Before Rossi could even register that the gun was gone, Amanda grabbed his wrists, yanked them down from the roof, and brutally secured them to the top of the steering wheel. He let out a yelp of pain as the thick plastic teeth bit deep into his skin, locking his hands in place. Hey, what the hell are you doing? Rossi thrashed against the steering wheel, panic flooding his eyes. You can't leave me here. Amanda leaned in close, invading his personal space. Her hazel eyes were completely devoid of warmth, calculating and hollow. Listen to me very carefully. Vince, you're going to sit here and think long and hard about your career choices. She reached across the steering column, ripped the keys out of the ignition, and stepped back out of the vehicle. In exactly 2 hours, Amanda continued, her voice like cracking ice. I am going to call the local sheriff's department from a payphone. I'll report a suspicious vehicle parked near the municipal water supply. They'll come up here, find you, run your plates, and definitely cite you for trespassing and carrying that unlicensed, unregistered .38 I just threw in the dirt. She casually tossed his car keys into the dense, thorny blackberry bushes 50 yards down the ridge. Rossi groaned in despair. But here is the important part. Vince, Amanda said, leaning her head back into the open doorway. "If I ever see your face in Elmwood again, if you ever come within 100 miles of my daughter, I won't use zip ties next time. We'll skip straight to the shovel and the lime. Do we have an understanding?" Rossi nodded frantically, sweat dripping from his chin onto his cheap tie. "Crystal clear. I'm a ghost, lady. I swear to God, you'll never see me again." "Good boy." Amanda slammed the car door shut. The booming sound echoed through the quiet woods, finalizing the threat. She didn't look back as she melted into the tree line, her boots moving silently over the damp earth toward her hidden Tahoe. She had neutralized the immediate threat to Sophie. Now, she had a destination: Albany. The hunter had caught the hound. It was time to track down the master. And whoever had kept Chloe's necklace for 20 long years was about to learn a very painful lesson about waking sleeping dogs. The drive north on Interstate 87 took exactly 48 minutes. Amanda kept the Tahoe's speedometer perfectly synced with the flow of mid-morning traffic. Blending in was the first rule of reconnaissance. You don't speed, you don't weave, you become invisible. Her mind, however, was running at Mach 2. During the pat-down of Vince Rossi, before she had zip-tied him to his steering wheel, Amanda had palmed a small, unmarked brass key from his coat pocket. It was a standard-issue United States Postal Service P.O. Box key. Rossi was a pawn, a loud, sloppy pawn. Whoever X was. They had intentionally used a low-level private investigator to deliver the necklace. It was a buffer, a firewall meant to keep Amanda away from the truth. But buffers only work if the person hitting them doesn't know how to breach. Chloe. The name echoed in Amanda's head, synchronized with the rhythmic thumping of the highway expansion joints. She remembered the smell of strawberry lip gloss, the sound of a blue Schwinn bicycle rattling down a dirt path, and the crushing, suffocating weight of an empty creek bed. 20 years of therapy, combat deployments, and ruthless compartmentalization, all undone by a single, tarnished piece of silver. Amanda pulled off the highway and navigated the crowded streets of downtown Albany. The USPS building was a monolithic structure of gray concrete and faded patriotic banners. Built in the brutalist architectural style of the 1970s. She parked 3 blocks away in a paid garage, intentionally avoiding the post office's parking lot cameras. She reached into the backseat and pulled a faded, olive-drab baseball cap low over her brow, slipping on a pair of clear, blue light-blocking glasses. It wasn't a disguise meant to fool facial recognition software, but it was enough to obscure her features from casual witnesses and low-resolution overhead cameras. Taking a deep breath, she stepped out into the brisk New York air. The interior of the post office smelled of industrial floor wax and old paper. The main lobby was mildly crowded, a half-dozen people waiting in line to mail packages. An elderly woman organizing stamps. A businessman rapidly typing on his phone. Amanda ignored them all, her eyes naturally scanning for exits, blind spots, and threats. She walked past the main counter and entered the alcove housing the P.O. boxes. The walls were lined floor to ceiling with small, brass-plated doors. Box 409. It was located in the middle of the third row on the left wall. Amanda didn't go straight for it. She stopped at a high-top counter in the center of the room. Pulling a blank shipping label and a pen from the dispenser, she pretended to fill it out, using the reflective surface of the plastic partition to observe the room behind her. Clear. She walked over to box 409. Slipping the brass key into the lock. She turned it. The mechanism clicked with a hollow snap. She pulled the small metal door open. Inside the narrow rectangular space, there was no mail, no padded envelopes, just a single, solitary object resting perfectly in the center of the dusty metal floor. It was a photograph, an old, physical Polaroid. Amanda's chest tightened. She reached in, her gloved fingertips pinching the white border of the film, and pulled it out into the harsh fluorescent light. It was a picture of two little girls sitting on the hood of a rusty pickup truck. Eating popsicles. They were laughing, their faces lit by the golden hour of a late summer afternoon. It was Amanda and Chloe, taken just 3 days before Chloe vanished. But the photograph had been altered. Chloe's face was untouched, smiling brightly up at the camera. But Amanda's face, her 12-year-old, innocent face, had been violently scratched out with what looked like the tip of a sewing needle or razor blade. The photo paper was gouged deep, leaving a jagged, white void where her head should be. Amanda flipped the Polaroid over. Written on the back, in precise, architectural block lettering using a black Sharpie, were 3 words. "You were late." A cold spike of adrenaline pierced right through her military training. The message wasn't just a taunt, it was an intimate, psychological strike. The official police report stated Amanda was delayed because of homework. Only a handful of people knew the real, agonizing truth. She was late because she had stopped to watch a cartoon. Lying to her mother about the homework. Only the killer, who must have been watching them that day, could have known how deeply those 10 minutes haunted her. Suddenly, Amanda felt the distinct, prickling sensation at the back of her neck, the biological warning system of a soldier in the crosshairs. Observe, she didn't move her head. She only moved her eyes. She scanned the ceiling of the alcove. Standard federal security cameras, large, black domes, were mounted in the corners. But those were pointing toward the main lobby and the exit doors. Then, she saw it. Tucked neatly into the dark crevice of the HVAC vent directly above the P.O. boxes was a tiny secondary lens. It wasn't a federal camera. It was a high-definition, aftermarket micro camera, the kind operators used to monitor safe houses. It was angled down, pointing directly at the space in front of box 409. X didn't just want her to find the photo. X was watching her find it. Right now. Amanda's fear evaporated, instantly replaced by a cold, calculated fury. The game of cat and mouse had just leveled up. She turned her body slightly, looking directly up into the hidden micro lens. She didn't flinch. She didn't show anger or terror. She simply stared into the digital eye with the dead, soulless expression she used to reserve for high-valued targets in the Middle East. Slowly, deliberately, Amanda raised her right hand. She held up the Polaroid so the camera could see it. Then she calmly ripped the photograph exactly in half, separating her scratched-out face from Chloe's. She let the pieces flutter to the linoleum floor. She mouthed 3 words to the hidden watcher. "I am coming." Without another glance, Amanda turned on her heel and walked out of the post office, blending back into the bustling city streets. The ghost had a face now, even if she couldn't see it yet, and she was going to burn his world to the ground. The drive back to Elmwood was a blur of asphalt and autumn trees. Amanda's hands were steady on the steering wheel, but her mind was a violent storm of calculations and suppressed memories. "You were late." The words were branded into her cerebral cortex. For 2 decades, the Elmwood Police Department had operated under the assumption that Chloe Evans was a crime of opportunity, a predator cruising through a small town who saw a lonely girl by a creek. But the Polaroid changed everything. It meant the killer had been stalking them. He had been close enough to take that picture 3 days prior. He knew their routines. He knew Amanda had lied to her mother about homework to watch TV. He wasn't a drifter. He was a local. Amanda pulled the Tahoe up to the chain-link gates of Vance Custom Auto and Salvage. The heavy steel barriers rolled open automatically. Marcus had her vehicle's transponder tagged in his security system. She drove into the cavernous main garage. The door's ceiling shut behind her with a heavy, metallic thud that finalized the lockdown. She stepped out of the truck and walked toward the back office. Through the reinforced glass window, the tension in her chest evaporated for a fraction of a second. Sophie was sitting cross-legged on an old Persian rug, a slice of pepperoni pizza in one hand, while 3 tiny barn kittens tumbled over her sneakers. She was laughing. She was safe. Marcus was leaning against the doorframe, a mug of black coffee in his massive hand, watching the perimeter monitors. He glanced at Amanda as she approached. She named the orange one, Tactical. Marcus grunted, his beard twitching in what might have been a smile. Kids got good instincts. She gets it from her mother, Amanda said softly. She placed her hand flat against the glass, just watching Sophie for a moment. I will burn the world down before I let the dark touch you, she promised silently. She turned to Marcus, her eyes hardening back into chipped flint. We need to talk. Secure room. Marcus nodded. He tapped on the glass, catching Sophie's attention. Hey, squirt. Uncle Marcus and your mom have to talk boring adult truck stuff. Do not feed Tactical any more pepperoni. Understood? Copy that. Sophie offered a sloppy, grease-stained salute. Marcus led Amanda into a windowless storage room in the back of the shop. It didn't look like much, just shelves of engine parts and dusty manuals. But Amanda knew the walls were lined with copper mesh, creating a Faraday cage. No signals went in, no signals came out. Talk to me, Brooks, Marcus said, crossing his arms over his broad chest. Amanda pulled Vince Rossi's burner phone from her jacket and tossed it onto the metal workbench. Then, she recounted everything: the post office, the empty P.O. box, the altered Polaroid photograph, and the hidden aftermarket micro-camera in the HVAC vent. When she mentioned the camera, Marcus's posture shifted. The mechanic disappeared, replaced entirely by the force recon communications specialist he used to be. He wanted you to find the photo. Marcus rumbled, his voice low and dangerous. He wanted to watch your face when the trauma hit. That's a sadist's signature. He got nothing, Amanda replied coldly. But he made a mistake. If he was watching a live feed, that micro camera had to be transmitting data. It wasn't hardwired into the post office's mainframe. The feds would have caught that. Exactly, Marcus said, moving toward a heavy steel cabinet. He unlocked it, revealing a high-end Panasonic Toughbook laptop and a mess of decryption hardware that would make the NSA nervous. Which means it was using a commercial cellular bandwidth to bounce the feed to a receiver. Did you get a look at the make and model? Lens housing was matte black, roughly half an inch, looked like a modified Wise or an Arlo unit, stripped of its external casing. Amanda reported, her photographic memory serving up the exact dimensions. Standard commercial drop cam, Marcus muttered. his thick fingers flying across the rugged keyboard. He plugged a decryption dongle into Rossi's burner phone. Let's see what our idiot private eye left behind first. Lines of code cascaded down the laptop screen. Rossi said he was paid in Monero. Untraceable, Amanda noted. Nothing is untraceable if the person using it is lazy. Marcus countered. Crypto is anonymous on the blockchain. Sure, but to get it into a wallet on this burner phone, Rossi had to connect to a network. Let's look at the phone's handshake logs. Gotcha. Marcus hit the enter key. A map of New York State popped up on the screen. Rossi received the payment ping 2 days ago at 11 p.m. Marcus explained, but our guy, X, didn't use a clean VPN protocol. He bounced his signal through a proxy server in Russia. But the initial handshake dropped a packet. The origination IP address wasn't masked for exactly 0.4 seconds. Amanda leaned over the desk. Her eyes fixed on the map. Where did the signal originate? Marcus zoomed in. The map bypassed Albany. It bypassed the state capital. It zoomed directly into the rural, wooded outskirts of Elmwood. A blinking red dot appeared on a topographical map, right on the edge of the county line. Amanda's blood ran cold. She knew that terrain. Every kid who grew up in Elmwood knew that terrain. The old Blackridge Quarry, Amanda whispered. Abandoned since '98. Marcus confirmed, pulling up a satellite overlay. It's 3,000 acres of flooded rock pits, rusted machinery, and dense forest. No cell service. No local law enforcement patrols. It's a fortress, Amanda said, her mind already shifting into tactical planning. And it's exactly 2 miles downstream from the creek where Chloe went missing. For 20 years, the police had searched the woods around the town, but they had never dredged the deep, treacherous waters of the Blackridge Quarry. It was considered too dangerous. And it was technically private property belonging to a bankrupt mining conglomerate. If X is out there, he has a localized network setup, a satellite uplink or a hard line he tapped into, Marcus said, closing the laptop with a heavy snap. He looked at Amanda, his dark eyes filled with grim understanding. You're not calling the cops, are you? The cops had 20 years. Marcus, they filed her away in a cardboard box. Amanda said. She unzipped her jacket, revealing the shoulder holster carrying her backup weapon. A compact Sig Sauer. This guy has been watching me. He knows I have Sophie. I am not waiting for him to make the next move. You need a spotter. Going into a complex environment like the quarry blind is suicide. You are my spotter, Amanda instructed, her tone brokering no argument. You stay here. You lock down the shop. You keep Sophie safe. I need you on comms. Running thermal satellite overwatch if you can hack the NOAA feed again. I'm going in. Marcus didn't argue. He knew that tone. It was the voice of a commander stepping onto the battlefield. He reached under the workbench and pulled out a matte black earpiece and a tactical radio. Comms check is in 30 minutes. Marcus said, handing her the gear. If you miss a check-in, Brooks, I'm bringing the cavalry. If I miss a check-in, Amanda said, turning toward the door, her silhouette framed by the harsh fluorescent light. It means I'm busy digging a grave. The sun had completely surrendered to the horizon by the time Amanda reached the perimeter of Blackridge Quarry. The temperature had plummeted, leaving a biting, damp chill in the air that tasted faintly of pulverized limestone and decaying wet leaves. She had parked the Tahoe 3 miles down an old logging road, masking its thermal signature under a dense canopy of pine branches. From there, She humped it on foot. The darkness was absolute, unbothered by city lights or a moon, which was exactly how Amanda preferred to operate. She crouched behind a rotting barricade that read warning, dangerous water drop-off. Reaching up to pull down the monocular night vision goggle, NVG, mounted to her tactical helmet. The world instantly washed into sharp, luminescent shades of green. "Vance, comms check," Amanda whispered, pressing the transmitter at her collar. A burst of static hissed in her earpiece, followed by Marcus's deep, steady voice, loud and clear. "Brooks, I managed to piggyback onto a forestry satellite. I have a topographic overhead of the quarry. You're standing at the southern ridge. Below you is a 300-foot drop into the flooded main pit." "Copy that," Amanda said, scanning the massive, jagged crater below. "Do you have thermal?" "Negative on wide-band thermal. The rock density is messing with the sensors. But I'm picking up a faint, localized power draw near the northern sector. Looks like it's coming from the old rock crusher facility. It's small, could be a generator." "That's our target," Amanda confirmed. "Going dark. Check in at 0200. "Watch your six, Amanda. Something about this feels staged." "I know," she replied, her voice devoid of emotion. "That's why I brought the big guns." She tapped her chest rig, ensuring her spare magazines were seated properly, and drew her Sig Sauer P320. She had threaded a sleek, black suppressor onto the barrel. It wouldn't make the gun completely silent. That was a Hollywood myth. But it would mask the muzzle flash and alter the acoustic signature enough to confuse a target's spatial awareness. Amanda began her descent. The terrain was treacherous. Loose scree, rusted coils of industrial cable hidden in the underbrush, and jagged limestone teeth jutting from the earth threatened to break an ankle with every step. But she moved like water flowing downhill. Fluid, silent, inevitable. It took her 40 minutes to navigate the rim and reach the quarry floor. The air down here was heavy, smelling strongly of stagnant water and old motor oil. Looming out of the green-tinted darkness was the rock crusher facility, a monstrous, multi-story structure of corrugated steel and iron beams that looked like the skeleton of a dead dinosaur. As she closed within 50 yards, Amanda's combat instincts flared. The hairs on her arms stood up. "Stop!" She froze mid-step, her boot hovering an inch above the gravel. She slowly lowered her foot. Distributing her weight backward, she reached into her tactical pouch and pulled out a small, high-powered infrared flashlight, invisible to the naked eye but blindingly bright through her NVGs. She swept the beam across the narrow path leading to the facility's heavy steel doors. There it was, barely 6 inches off the ground. A microfilament tripwire was stretched taut across the gap between 2 rusted oil drums. "Amateur," Amanda breathed, though her heart rate ticked up a notch. She followed the wire with her eyes. It didn't lead to a flare or a simple noisemaker. It led to a block of C4 explosive packed tightly into the crevices of the steel drum. Wired to a crude blasting cap. If she had tripped it, the resulting shrapnel from the drum would have shredded her from the waist down. Whoever X was, he wasn't just hiding. He was actively defending his perimeter with lethal force. And he had access to military-grade ordnance. Amanda stepped carefully over the wire, giving the explosive a wide berth. She reached the heavy steel door of the facility. The windows were boarded up from the inside, but a faint, rhythmic humming vibrated through the metal frame. A generator. The door was secured with a heavy-duty, Commercial-grade padlock. Amanda didn't bother with lockpicks. She drew a pair of specialized bolt cutters from the small of her back, titanium jaws designed for rapid breaching, and snapped the lock's hasp with a sharp crack. She caught the heavy lock before it could hit the ground, set it aside, and gripped the door handle. Pie the corner. She opened the door just a fraction of an inch, using the narrow angle to scan the interior before committing her body to the fatal funnel of the doorway. The inside of the rock crusher wasn't an abandoned, dusty ruin. Amanda pushed the door open, her gun raised, her finger resting lightly on the trigger guard. The cavernous space had been retrofitted. Heavy plastic sheeting hung from the ceiling, creating a sealed, climate-controlled environment in the center of the rusted factory. She stepped through the plastic flaps. The air inside was warm and smelled sickeningly sweet, like vanilla air freshener masking something stale. A bank of computer monitors illuminated the space with a pale, blue light, but no one was sitting at the desk. The chair was empty, a half-drank cup of coffee sitting next to a sophisticated keyboard setup. Amanda moved forward, her eyes darting across the screens. She expected to see security footage of the quarry perimeter. Instead, her breath caught in her throat. The monitors weren't showing the outside of the facility. They were showing her life. Screen 1. A live feed of her street in Elmwood, viewed from a camera hidden in the street lamp directly across from her house. Screen 2. A digital archive of her military service records, heavily redacted but undeniably hers. Screen 3. A horrific, meticulously organized timeline of Chloe's disappearance, complete with police reports, newspaper clippings, and weather data from exactly 20 years ago. But it was the center of the room that made Amanda lower her weapon. Her combat discipline failing her for the first time in 10 years. Sitting on a raised, wooden platform, illuminated by a single spotlight, was a blue Schwinn bicycle. The tires were flat, the paint was chipped, the little white basket on the front was cracked. But it was Chloe's. It was exactly as it had been the day she left it by the creek. And resting inside the cracked white basket was a child's math workbook. Amanda's math workbook, the one she had used as an excuse to be 10 minutes late. "I kept it safe for you, Mandy." The voice didn't come from the radio in her ear. It came from the shadows behind her. It was distorted, mechanical, pumped through a hidden speaker system in the ceiling. But the nickname, Mandy, hit her like a physical blow. Only one person had ever called her that. Before Amanda could spin around, before she could raise the Sig Sauer, the heavy steel door of the facility slammed shut with a deafening crash, plunging the outer perimeter into total darkness. The electronic lock engaged with a heavy clack. "Marcus!" Amanda yelled, tapping her earpiece violently. Nothing but dead air. The plastic sheeting wasn't just for climate control. The walls of the retrofitted room were lined with lead and copper. It was a Faraday cage. Her signal was blocked. She was locked inside a bomb-rigged facility, cut off from her Overwatch, standing in a museum dedicated to her greatest trauma. "Welcome home, soldier." The distorted voice echoed from the speakers, dripping with a terrifying, hollow amusement. "Let's see if you can save her this time. Let's see if you can save her this time." The distorted voice bounced off the lead-lined walls, a sickening echo that tried to claw its way into Amanda's psyche. Most people would have frozen. Most people would have looked at the bicycle, collapsed under the weight of a 20-year guilt trip, and begged for answers. Amanda raised her suppressed Sig Sauer and put two 9mm hollow point rounds directly into the ceiling speaker. Peefed, peefed. The voice cut out in a shower of sparks and shredded acoustic foam. Silence, heavy and absolute, crashed back into the room. Rule 1 of an ambush: break the enemy's momentum. Amanda didn't stand still. She dropped to a crouch, instantly moving away from the illuminated center of the room. The spotlight hitting the blue Schwinn was a focal point, a kill zone designed to draw her eye and keep her stationary. She melted into the shadows near the bank of computer monitors, her night vision goggles painting the room in sharp, ghostly green. She took a slow, tactical breath through her nose. The vanilla air freshener was masking something else. A faint, acrid chemical smell. Carbon monoxide. The ventilation fans had stopped. The climate-controlled plastic sheeting wasn't just a Faraday cage to block her comms, it was a gas chamber. X wasn't planning on interrogating her. He was planning on suffocating her while she stared at the monument of her greatest failure. She had less than 3 minutes before the hypoxia would start dulling her reflexes. 4 minutes until unconsciousness. Amanda scanned the perimeter. The steel door she had entered through was electronically magnetically sealed. Shooting the lock wouldn't work. It required a continuous power draw to stay magnetized. She needed to cut the power or blow the frame. Suddenly, a shadow detached itself from the darkest corner of the room, near the server racks. It wasn't X. The thermal signature through the ambient NVG light was massive, too big to be a strategic mastermind playing mind games. It was a physical asset, a cleaner. He was clad in heavy tactical armor, wearing a dual-tube night vision helmet, and carrying a suppressed short-barreled AR-15. He didn't speak, he just raised the rifle. Amanda was already moving. She dove horizontally behind the heavy oak desk holding the monitors just as a burst of suppressed 5.56mm rounds chewed through the plastic casing of the screens above her head. Sparks rained down, raining hot plastic onto her jacket. She didn't return fire immediately. A pistol against body armor was a losing math equation. She needed to close the distance. Amanda grabbed the heavy, ergonomic office chair and kicked it violently out from behind the desk to her left. The cleaner tracked the movement, firing a tight 3-round burst into the chair's backrest. It bought her exactly 0.8 seconds. Amanda lunged to the right, clearing the desk. She fired twice while moving, not at his chest plate, but at his legs. One round caught the cleaner in the right thigh, just below the Kevlar groin flap. He grunted, his knee buckling slightly, but his combat momentum carried him forward. He swung the rifle barrel toward her head. Amanda didn't back away. She stepped inside the arc of the weapon. She grabbed the hot handguard of the AR-15 with her left hand, violently redirecting the muzzle toward the ceiling as he pulled the trigger. The suppressed shot blew a hole in the plastic sheeting above them. Simultaneously, Amanda drove the base of her Sig Sauer hard into the soft, unprotected tissue of his throat. The man choked, gagging for air, but his size was overwhelming. He dropped the rifle, grabbed Amanda by the tactical vest, and hurled her backward. She slammed into the raised wooden platform holding Chloe's bicycle. The wood splintered. The breath was knocked from her lungs in a sharp gasp. Her pistol clattering out of her hand and sliding across the concrete floor into the dark. The cleaner drew a fixed-blade hunting knife from his chest rig and lunged, all 250 pounds of him dropping toward her with lethal intent. Adapt. Overcome. Amanda rolled to the side. The hunting knife embedded itself an inch deep into the wooden platform, right where her chest had been a millisecond prior. Before he could wrench the blade free, Amanda reached down to her ankle. In one fluid, blindingly fast motion, she drew her own combat knife. She didn't slash, she thrust. She drove the blackened steel blade up, bypassing the heavy ceramic strike plate on his chest. Finding the vulnerable gap under his armpit, she twisted the blade, severing the brachial artery, and kicked him hard in the chest to create separation. The cleaner let out a wet, gurgling sound. He stumbled backward, clutching his side, his night vision goggles knocked askew. He collapsed heavily against the steel door, sliding down to the floor, his life violently draining out onto the cold concrete. Amanda didn't pause to watch him die. Her vision was already starting to blur slightly at the edges. The carbon monoxide was building up. The air was getting heavy. She retrieved her Sig Sauer, checking the chamber. Before kneeling next to the dying man, she ripped his helmet off. He was a stranger, Eastern European features, probably private military contractor, just another ghost hired by X. But he was exactly what Amanda needed to breach the door. She frantically searched his tactical vest. 2 spare rifle magazines, an encrypted radio, and there, strapped to his belt, a fragmentation grenade. A standard M67. "Thank you for your service," Amanda muttered grimly. She dragged his heavy, limp body directly against the electronically sealed steel door. She took the M67, pulled the pin, and wedged the live explosive tightly between the man's heavy ceramic chest plate and the magnetic lock housing of the door. The body armor would act as a shape charge, directing the blast force forward into the metal rather than back into the room. Amanda sprinted toward the far end of the room, diving behind the heaviest piece of machinery she could find, an old, rusted iron rock tumbler. She curled into a tight ball, covering her ears, opening her mouth to equalize the pressure. 3, 2, 1. The explosion was deafening in the enclosed space. A concussive shockwave ripped through the room, shattering the remaining computer monitors and violently tearing down the climate-controlled plastic sheeting. The smell of high explosives and pulverized concrete instantly overpowered the vanilla air freshener. Amanda stood up, her ears ringing with a high-pitched whine. Dust choked the air, thick and gray. But through the swirling debris, she saw it. The blast had completely warped the steel door frame and destroyed the magnetic lock. The heavy door hung open on one mangled hinge, revealing the cool, dark, fresh air of the quarry outside. Amanda staggered out of the fatal funnel, coughing, her lungs burning as she greedily sucked in the cold night air. Instantly, the dead silence in her earpiece was broken by a frantic, screaming static. "Oogs, Amanda, do you copy? I'm tracking a localized seismic anomaly at your coordinates. Brooks, respond." Marcus's voice was borderline panicked. Amanda leaned against the cold, jagged rock wall of the quarry, spitting a wad of dust and blood onto the gravel. She hit the transmit button on her collar. "Vance, I'm here. Jesus Christ, Amanda, I lost you for 6 minutes. I was 30 seconds away from calling in a federal tactical team. What the hell happened?" "We had a welcoming committee," Amanda said, her voice raspy but returning to its chilling, operational calm. "I neutralized one hostile. The room was a trap. Gas, comms jammer, the works. Did you find anything on X?" Amanda looked back at the smoking ruin of the rock crusher facility. Inside, through the haze of the explosion, the blue Schwinn bicycle remained untouched on its splintered platform, a haunting centerpiece to the violence. She looked down at her left hand. During the brief search of the dead mercenary's body, she had pulled something from his tactical pouch. It wasn't a weapon, it was a folded piece of heavy cardstock. She clicked on her infrared flashlight and opened it. It was a crude, hand-drawn map of the Elmwood Cemetery. A specific grave was circled in bright red marker. "No," Amanda answered Marcus, her eyes fixed on the map. "But, X just sent me an invitation to the next location. I need you to pull the burial records for Elmwood Memorial from 20 years ago." "Whose grave are we looking for? Brooks?" Amanda's jaw tightened. "My mother's." The adrenaline was a liar. It convinced your body that the bruises weren't forming, that the cuts weren't bleeding, and that your lungs weren't screaming from inhaling pulverized concrete and C4 residue. But the drive back from Blackridge Quarry took exactly 32 minutes. And by minute 20, the adrenaline had packed its bags and left Amanda Brooks alone with the pain. She pulled the battered Tahoe into the side alley of Vance Custom Auto and Salvage, cutting the engine before she hit the garage door to minimize the noise. The heavy steel door rumbled open. Marcus was standing there, a customized M4 carbine slung across his chest, his eyes scanning the darkness behind her vehicle before hitting the manual override to seal them inside. Amanda stepped out. Her legs felt like they were made of wet sand. Her tactical jacket was torn. Her face was smeared with ash and dried blood from a superficial cut on her cheek. And she smelled strongly of high explosives. Marcus didn't say a word. He slung his rifle, walked over, and simply offered his massive arm. Amanda leaned heavily into it, letting out a breath she felt like she'd been holding since she stepped into that gas chamber. "Where is she?" Amanda rasped, her throat raw. "Sleeping on the cot in the back office," Marcus rumbled, guiding her toward the industrial sink in the corner of the garage. She stayed up watching old cartoons on the laptop. Out cold for the last hour. "Good." Amanda gripped the edge of the deep metal sink, turning on the cold water. "Keep her there. She can't see me like this." Marcus opened a heavy red trauma kit on the workbench next to the sink. He didn't ask if she was okay. In their world, okay just meant you were still breathing. He tossed her a bottle of sterile saline and a tube of surgical superglue. Amanda stripped off her ruined tactical vest and the torn jacket. Beneath it, her gray t-shirt was clinging to her skin with cold sweat. She washed the soot and blood from her face and hands, wincing as the icy water hit the raw scrape across her ribs where the mercenary had thrown her against the wooden platform. She applied the superglue to a jagged cut on her forearm, biting the inside of her cheek as it burned like liquid fire. "One hostile neutralized," Marcus stated, handing her a clean black t-shirt. It was a question wrapped in a report. "Private contractor, Eastern European, heavily geared," Amanda said, pulling the shirt over her head. "He wasn't X. He was just the muscle. X was watching through a closed-circuit feed before I blew the door." She reached into her pocket and pulled out the folded, blood-smudged piece of cardstock, placing it flat on the steel workbench. Marcus leaned in, adjusting the overhead halogen lamp. "A map of Elmwood Memorial," Marcus muttered, his thick brow furrowing. "He led you to the quarry just to give you this?" "The quarry was a test," Amanda corrected him, her eyes cold and distant. He wanted to see if I was the same terrified 12-year-old girl who lost her best friend. Or the weapon the military turned me into. I passed. So, he gave me the next breadcrumb. She pointed to the red circle scrawled over a specific grid on the cemetery map. Plot 41B. My mother's grave, Amanda said, her voice devoid of any warmth. Eleanor Brooks had died of aggressive pancreatic cancer while Amanda was on her second tour in Kandahar. Their relationship had been fractured long before that. Eleanor was a strict, overbearing woman who cared more about appearances than affection. When Chloe vanished, Eleanor's only concern was that Amanda not speak to the press, effectively burying her daughter's trauma under a rug of suburban propriety. I ran the burial records while you were inbound, Marcus said, turning to a rugged tablet on the desk. Eleanor Brooks passed away October 2015. Plot 41B. Standard casket, concrete vault, but I dug a little deeper into the cemetery's administrative logs. Amanda looked up, her tactical mind engaging past the physical exhaustion. What did you find? Elmwood Memorial digitized their visitor logs and groundskeeping reports 3 years ago. Marcus explained, swiping across the screen. Every time a landscaping crew moves dirt, or a visitor requests a grave cleaning, it gets logged. Look at this. He turned the tablet toward her. It was a maintenance invoice from exactly 6 months ago. Someone paid the cemetery to unseal the decorative stone border around Plot 41B and plant a very specific type of flower. Marcus said, blue hydrangeas. Amanda's breath hitched in her chest. The cold garage suddenly felt suffocatingly tight. Chloe's favorite flower, Amanda whispered. She remembered the massive hydrangea bushes behind Chloe's house, where they used to hide and read comic books. It gets worse, Marcus said gently, placing a massive hand on her shoulder. The payment for the landscaping was made through a cashier's check. The name on the check was an LLC registered out of Delaware. I ran the shell company. It was incorporated 20 years ago. The exact week Chloe went missing. Amanda stared at the screen, the pieces of the puzzle snapping together with terrifying clarity. This wasn't just a stalker who had found a cold case and decided to play games. This was connected directly to the day Chloe disappeared. Her mother, Eleanor, had known something. Perhaps she had seen something. Or worse, perhaps she had been involved in covering it up. The killer was mocking her, leaving Chloe's favorite flowers on the grave of the woman who had forced Amanda to stay silent. He's been planning this for 2 decades, Amanda said, her voice dropping to a lethal, determined register. He waited until I retired. He waited until I came back to Elmwood with my own daughter to spring the trap. Amanda, if X is tying this to your mother, going to that cemetery is exactly what he wants you to do. It's an exposed environment, perfect for a sniper. I know, Amanda replied, turning away from the workbench. She walked softly toward the back office. Through the cracked door, she could see Sophie curled up under a heavy wool blanket, the orange kitten named Tactical asleep on her chest. The sight of her daughter's peaceful, breathing form anchored Amanda to reality. It reminded her exactly what she was fighting for. She wasn't fighting for revenge anymore. She was fighting to sever the rot of the past before it could infect her daughter's future. She gently closed the door, letting Sophie sleep. When Amanda turned back to Marcus, the exhausted mother was gone. The operator was back online. We don't go at night. That's his game, Amanda commanded, her mind formulating the operational strategy. We go tomorrow at high noon. In broad daylight, surrounded by civilians and groundskeepers. He can't use explosives or heavy artillery without drawing the National Guard. And what exactly are we looking for at the grave? Marcus asked, racking the bolt of his M4 to clear the chamber. A shovel, Amanda said plainly, her hazel eyes locking onto his. Because if he planted blue hydrangeas, he planted something else underneath them. And I am going to dig it up. High noon in Elmwood was a portrait of suburban tranquility. The autumn sun hung bright and heavy in a cloudless sky, casting sharp, unforgiving shadows across the manicured lawns of Elmwood Memorial Cemetery. Amanda stepped out of the Tahoe. She wore faded denim, a loose-fitting flannel shirt to conceal the Glock 19 holstered at her hip, and a pair of dark aviator sunglasses. She looked like a grieving daughter making a routine Sunday visit. She moved like a hunter stepping into the brush. "Comms check," Amanda murmured, adjusting the flesh-colored earpiece hidden beneath her hair. "I have eyes on you." Marcus's voice crackled softly in her ear. He was parked 300 yards away on a slight elevation near the cemetery's eastern gates. Sitting in his heavy-duty tow truck, he had a pair of military-grade Steiner binoculars resting on the steering wheel, scanning the tree line and the scattered mourners. Sophie was safely locked down back at the auto shop, guarded by two of Marcus's massive, fiercely loyal junkyard dogs and a reinforced steel door. "What's the perimeter looking like, Vance?" "Quiet. Too quiet. I've got a groundskeeper on a riding mower 2 sectors over, an elderly couple by the mausoleums, and a jogger on the outer path. No suspicious vehicles. No glint of sniper optics. You're clear to proceed to plot 41B." Amanda slung a canvas duffel bag over her shoulder and began the walk down the winding gravel path. She didn't feel the usual sting of grief that accompanied cemetery visits. Her relationship with Eleanor Brooks had died long before the pancreatic cancer took her. Eleanor had been an architect of appearances, a woman who valued the pristine image of her family above the emotional survival of her daughter. When Chloe disappeared, Eleanor had forbidden Amanda from talking about it, labeling it a tragedy best left to the authorities. Now, walking toward the polished granite headstone bearing her mother's name, Amanda wondered if that silence hadn't been about propriety, but about preservation. Plot 41B sat under the sprawling branches of a massive weeping willow. Just as the maintenance logs had indicated, a perfectly cultivated bed of vibrant blue hydrangeas bordered the headstone. They were blooming out of season, aggressively beautiful against the gray stone. "I'm at the target," Amanda whispered. "Copy. You have a 10-minute window before the groundskeeper's route brings him into your line of sight. Make it fast, Brooks." Amanda dropped to one knee. She unzipped the canvas duffel and pulled out a short-handled entrenching tool, a folding tactical shovel she had carried through the mountains of Afghanistan. She locked the blade into place with a sharp clack. She didn't hesitate. She drove the steel blade directly into the root system of the blue hydrangeas. The soil was soft, freshly turned within the last few months. Amanda dug with brutal efficiency, her movements mechanical, stripping away the flowers Chloe had loved so much. Dirt flew, staining her jeans and settling into the cuts on her hands from the night before. 1 foot down, 18 inches. Clink. The steel edge of the shovel struck something hard. It wasn't a rock, it was a hollow, metallic sound. Amanda dropped the shovel and started digging frantically with her bare hands, tearing away the damp earth. Her fingers brushed against cold, hard plastic. It was a Pelican micro case, roughly the size of a thick paperback book, completely waterproof and highly durable. She pulled it free from the dirt, wiping the grime from the latches. "Vance," Amanda breathed, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I've got a package." "Is it rigged?" Marcus asked, the tension spiking in his voice. Amanda inspected the hinges and the seal. "No wires. No external detonator. It's a standard stash box." She popped the two heavy plastic latches and opened the lid. The interior was lined with custom-cut foam. Nestled inside were two items. The first was a small, tarnished silver key on a faded pink lanyard. Amanda recognized it instantly. It was the key to Chloe's childhood diary. A diary the police had never been able to locate during the initial investigation. The second item was an old, battered microcassette voice recorder, the kind used in the late 90s and early 2000s. A piece of masking tape was stuck to the back with a single word written in the same architectural block lettering as the photograph. "Listen." Amanda's hands trembled, not from fear, but from a terrifying, localized rage. She pressed the play button on the recorder. A sharp hiss of analog static filled the speaker, followed by the sound of a woman crying. Not a soft, sorrowful cry, but a panicked, hyperventilating sob. Amanda's blood ran completely cold. It was her mother, Eleanor. I didn't know what to do." Eleanor's voice stammered on the 20-year-old recording. The audio was slightly muffled, as if recorded secretly from inside a pocket or a purse. "He told me if I said anything to the police, if I told them what I saw driving past the creek, he would take Amanda next. He promised me he would take my little girl." Another voice spoke on the tape. A man's voice. Calm, smooth, utterly terrifying. "You made the right choice. Eleanor, you're a good mother. You protected your own. Just go home, wash the mud off your tires, and forget 12-year-old Chloe Evans ever existed. We have a deal now." The recording clicked off, plunging the cemetery back into the mundane sounds of chirping birds and distant lawnmowers. Amanda stared at the tape recorder, the world tilting violently on its axis. Her mother hadn't just been cold. Her mother had been an accessory after the fact. Eleanor Brooks had witnessed the abduction, or at least the immediate aftermath, and had been blackmailed into silence by the killer to protect Amanda. The killer hadn't just taken Chloe, he had weaponized a mother's love to buy his freedom. "Brooks? Amanda, talk to me. What is it?" Marcus demanded over the comms, sensing the sudden, dangerous silence. Before Amanda could answer, a sharp, electronic buzzing vibrated against her thigh. It wasn't her encrypted satellite phone. It was coming from the canvas duffel bag. Amanda dropped the tape recorder, instantly drawing her Glock 19 and leveling it at the bag. With her free hand, she reached inside, tucked into the side pocket, slipped there sometime between her leaving the auto shop and arriving at the cemetery, was a cheap, disposable cell phone. It was ringing. Amanda slowly stood up, her eyes scanning the tree line, the mausoleums, the distant jogger. "He is here. He is watching right now." She hit the answer button and brought the phone to her ear, her weapon still drawn and steady. "Speak," Amanda commanded softly. "You always were a fast digger." "Mandy," the digitally distorted voice whispered through the receiver. It was the exact same voice from the speakers at the quarry. But this time, it carried a sickening tone of intimacy. "Did you like my little time capsule? Your mother was so cooperative. She kept my secret all the way to the grave." "Where are you?" Amanda asked, her voice an absolute zero. "I'm closer than you think." The voice chuckled. "You've spent the last 20 years fighting monsters in the desert, Amanda. But you forgot about the monsters in your own backyard. Your mother paid my toll. Now, it's your turn." The line clicked dead. "Amanda," Marcus shouted in her ear. "The jogger on the outer path. He just stopped. He's turning toward you. He's drawing a weapon." Amanda dropped the burner phone, fluidly raising her Glock with both hands, the sights locking onto the silhouette 300 feet away. The ghosts weren't just in the dirt anymore. They had come to the surface. And they were armed. The transition from a grieving daughter to a lethal operator took less than a quarter of a second. Amanda didn't freeze. She didn't gasp. As the jogger, a lean man in a gray hoodie and dark track pants, raised a compact MAC-10 submachine gun equipped with a heavy suppressor. Amanda simply let gravity do the work. She dropped the burner phone and threw her body sideways, diving behind the polished granite of Eleanor Brooks's headstone. Thwip thwip thwip. 3 suppressed 9mm rounds chewed into the top of the granite monument, raining sharp, pulverized stone chips over Amanda's shoulders. The irony wasn't lost on her. In life, her mother had used silence to protect her. In death, she was using her own gravestone to stop bullets. Contact front. Armed hostile. 50 yards. Closing fast. Amanda barked into her comms. Her Glock 19 pressed tight to her chest. Her breathing violently controlled. "I see him," Marcus roared in her earpiece. The sound of his heavy towed truck door slamming open echoing through the transmission. "I'm on foot, taking up a firing position. But I don't have a clean angle. The elderly couple is directly in my backdrop. If a 5.56 round over-penetrates, it'll hit them. You need to draw him east. Brooks. Toward the mausoleums." "Copy. Moving east." Amanda didn't blindly return fire. Spraying bullets over cover was a Hollywood myth that got people killed. She needed to break his line of sight. She grabbed the Pelican micro case and shoved it into her duffel bag, slinging the strap diagonally across her chest. She reached into her tactical pocket and pulled out a small, cylindrical smoke grenade, a civilian legal, fast-deploying airsoft smoke she had modified with a hotter ignition fuse. She pulled the pin and tossed it underhand, 3 yards to her left. Thick, dense white smoke instantly billowed outward, masking the gap between her mother's grave and the next row of headstones. The jogger fired a blind burst into the smokescreen. Amanda didn't go left, she went right. Staying low, practically bare crawling across the manicured grass, she sprinted toward a massive, Victorian-era stone angel. She moved from cover to cover, a weeping cherub, a marble obelisk, an iron bench, cutting the angle, forcing the shooter to pivot away from the open lawn and face the solid, windowless walls of the eastern mausoleums. "He's taking the bait," Marcus relayed, his breathing remarkably steady for a man his size running with a rifle. "He's tracking your movement. Distance. 30 yards. He's reloading." Reloading. That was her window. Amanda stepped out from behind the stone angel, raising the Glock 19 in a perfect, two-handed isosceles stance, both eyes open, front sight focus. She squeezed the trigger twice. Pop, pop. The unsuppressed roar of the 9mm shattered the Sunday quiet of the cemetery like a bomb going off. The groundskeeper 100 yards away fell off his riding mower in panic. Amanda's first round struck the jogger's MAC-10. violently ripping the weapon from his grip and shattering the receiver. Her second round caught him in the right shoulder, spinning him like a top before he crashed hard onto the gravel path. Target down, moving to secure, Amanda stated, never lowering her weapon. She closed the distance in seconds, her boots crunching on the gravel. The man was writhing on the ground, clutching his shattered shoulder, his gray hoodie rapidly staining a dark, glossy crimson. Amanda kicked the ruined submachine gun out of reach and pressed the muzzle of her hot Glock directly against the center of his forehead. "Don't move," she whispered, her voice colder than the graves surrounding them. The man looked up at her. He wasn't Eastern European like the mercenary at the quarry. He was local, pale, terrified, with a spiderweb tattoo crawling up the left side of his neck. "A prison rat, a hired gun. Who sent you?" Amanda demanded, pressing the barrel harder into his skin. "Give me a name." The man spat a glob of blood onto the grass, a manic, pain-fueled grin spreading across his face. He said you'd be fast. But he said it doesn't matter. The clock is ticking, Brooks." Suddenly, sirens began to wail in the distance. The gunshots had prompted a dozen 911 calls from the surrounding neighborhoods. Elmwood PD was en route, and their response time was under 3 minutes. "Amanda, we're out of time," Marcus yelled over the comms. "Local PD is inbound. 2 units approaching from the south gate. We need to ghost, now." Amanda glared at the bleeding hitman. She couldn't drag him to the truck. And executing an unarmed man in broad daylight went against every rule of engagement she possessed. But she wasn't leaving empty-handed. She holstered her weapon, reached down, and violently tore the man's burner phone and a set of car keys from his pockets. She grabbed him by the collar, hauling his face inches from hers. "When you talk to your boss," Amanda hissed, her eyes burning with a terrifying, unyielding fire, "you tell him the 12-year-old girl is dead. The operator is here, and I am bringing hell to his doorstep." She dropped him and sprinted toward the eastern perimeter wall. Marcus was already there, using his massive frame to boost her up. Amanda vaulted over the 6-foot wrought iron fence with the practiced ease of a combat veteran. Landing softly in the alleyway behind the cemetery, Marcus threw his rifle over, climbed the fence himself, and they sprinted toward the idling tow truck just as the first black and white police cruisers screamed through the main gates. 3 minutes later, they were blending seamlessly into the Sunday afternoon traffic on Route 9, moving exactly at the speed limit. The cab of the tow truck was silent, save for the low rumble of the diesel engine and the chaotic chatter of the police scanner Marcus had mounted on the dash. Amanda sat in the passenger seat, her breathing finally slowing to a normal rhythm. Her hands were covered in dirt and dried blood. She unzipped her duffel bag and pulled out the small Pelican case, retrieving the tarnished silver key on the faded pink lanyard. "The diary key. He set an ambush at the grave, but he still made sure I found the package," Amanda said, staring at the little piece of metal. "He wanted me to hear my mother's confession. He wanted to break my psychological foundation before he sent the shooter." "It's a textbook destabilization tactic," Marcus agreed, keeping his eyes on his rearview mirrors. "Isolate the target, destroy their support system, make them reckless. What does the key open?" "Chloe kept a diary," Amanda whispered, her thumb running over the cheap pink fabric of the lanyard. "A little blue book with a silver lock. We used to write our top-secret missions in it. The police turned her house upside down, but they never found it. They assumed the killer took it. If the killer had it, why give you the key now? Because he didn't take it. Amanda realized, the tactical pieces of the puzzle falling into place. Chloe hid it, and he knows that if I have the key, I'll know where to look. Marcus shifted gears, the truck roaring as they took the exit toward his auto shop. Where? Amanda looked out the window, watching the familiar, suffocating streets of Elmwood roll by. The town she had bled to protect was built on a foundation of lies. Her mother's lies, the police's incompetence, the killer's arrogance. The old Evans house on Willow Creek Drive, Amanda said, her voice hardening into absolute resolve. It's been abandoned for years. That's where it all started. And that's where I'm going to finish it. Willow Creek Drive used to be the kind of street featured in real estate brochures. Now, it was a graveyard of forgotten suburban dreams. The Evans house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, choked by decades of overgrown ivy and creeping oak branches that seemed to be actively dragging the structure back into the earth. The paint had peeled away like dead skin, and the front porch sagged under the weight of 20 harsh New York winters. After Chloe vanished, her parents' marriage had dissolved in a toxic cocktail of grief and blame. They moved away within the year, leaving the house to rot in foreclosure limbo. No one wanted to buy the home of the missing girl. Amanda parked the Tahoe 2 blocks over, slipping through a gap in a rusted chain-link fence to approach the property from the rear tree line. The late afternoon sun was beginning to dip, casting long, skeletal shadows across the unkempt yard. She paused at the edge of the woods, her eyes scanning the structure. "Vance, I'm at the objective," Amanda whispered into her comms. "Copy that, I've got you on GPS." Marcus replied. The background noise of the auto shop was gone. He was in the Faraday cage, monitoring her feed while Sophie remained completely secure. "I ran a thermal sweep via satellite. The roof is too degraded to get a solid internal reading. But I don't see any vehicles in a 5-block radius. You should be clear. But Brooks, be careful in there. Structurally, that place is a death trap. Psychologically, too," Amanda muttered. She drew her Glock 19, keeping it at the low ready, and moved toward the back patio. The sliding glass door was boarded up, but the wood was rotting. Amanda didn't waste time with a pry bar. She found a loose panel near the kitchen window, slipped her combat knife under the rusted nails, and quietly levered it open. She stepped over the sill and dropped into the kitchen. The smell hit her instantly, a heavy, suffocating mixture of mildew, dry rot, and stale air. But beneath that, buried deep in the olfactory centers of her brain, Amanda could almost smell the ghost of burnt chocolate chip cookies. It was a phantom memory, sharp and agonizing. She activated the weapon-mounted light on her Glock, casting a harsh white beam through the gloom. Dust motes danced in the light like tiny, disturbed spirits. The linoleum floor was curled at the edges. The refrigerator sat open, a rusted hollow cavern. Amanda moved with liquid silence, her soft-soled boots navigating the debris-strewn floor. Clear the first floor. Living room, empty, save for a collapsed sofa. Dining room, a shattered chandelier resting on a warped table. Hallway, clear. She stood at the base of the main staircase. The wooden steps groaned in the silence, settling under the weight of the decaying house. Taking a slow, measured breath, she began the ascent. She kept her back to the wall, pieing the angles of the second-floor landing. Every shadow looked like a threat. Every creak of the wind against the siding sounded like a footstep. She bypassed the master bedroom and walked straight to the door at the end of the hall. It was slightly ajar. Faded, peeling stickers of 90s pop bands still clung stubbornly to the wood. Chloe's room. Amanda pushed the door open. The weapon light swept the room. It was remarkably untouched by vandals, likely due to the local superstitions surrounding the property. The bed frame was bare, the mattress long gone, but the glow-in-the-dark stars they had glued to the ceiling were still there, pale and dead in the gloom. Amanda holstered her weapon, the tactical operator stepping aside for just a moment to let the 12-year-old girl breathe. She walked over to the window seat. It was a built-in wooden bench overlooking the backyard and the distant tree line that led to the creek. They used to sit here for hours, trading secrets, dreaming about escaping Elmwood, swearing they would join the military or become astronauts. Where would we hide it? Amanda thought, closing her eyes, forcing herself to regress to the logic of a child. Not under the mattress. Parents checked there. Not in the closet. Too obvious. She looked down at the wooden window seat. The cushioned top had rotted away, leaving just the wooden lid. She remembered Chloe complaining about a draft coming from the baseboards. Amanda dropped to her knees. She ran her gloved hands along the bottom edge of the window seat, pressing against the wooden paneling. About 6 inches from the left corner, the wood gave way slightly with a soft click. It wasn't a nailed board. It was a false front, held in place by cheap magnetic cabinet latches they must have stolen from the kitchen. Amanda pulled the panel away. Inside the dusty, dark cavity lay a small, rectangular object wrapped in a heavily degraded plastic grocery bag. Amanda's heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She pulled it out, her fingers trembling as she tore away the brittle plastic. It was a diary, bound in faded blue faux leather, secured by a tiny, silver padlock. Amanda reached into her pocket and pulled out the tarnished silver key she had dug up from her mother's grave. She inserted it into the padlock. It caught for a second, fighting 20 years of rust. But with a firm twist, the mechanism popped open. She unhooked the lock and opened the diary. The pages were yellowed, the blue ink of Chloe's gel pens fading but legible. Amanda skimmed the first few entries: crushes on boys, complaints about math homework, drawings of horses. But as she flipped toward the back, the handwriting changed. It became erratic, rushed, and pressed so hard into the paper it nearly tore through. October 10th. He was there again today. In the silver car. He just watches. I told Mandy, but she thinks I'm making it up to sound like a movie. I'm not making it up. October 12th. He spoke to me. He knew my name. He said he knows my mom and dad. He has eyes like dead water. I'm scared to walk to school. I'm going to tell Mandy we need to stop playing by the creek. I think he's waiting there. Amanda's breath hitched. I told Mandy. The guilt crashed over her like a physical wave. Chloe had tried to tell her, but 12-year-old Amanda had brushed it off as a game. And then, 2 days later, Amanda had been late. She turned to the very last page. There was no date, just a single, frantic sentence, written in massive, terrified letters. I saw what he has in the trunk. It's Chief Miller. Amanda froze. Chief Miller. Arthur Miller had been the chief of police in Elmwood 20 years ago. He was the man who had personally overseen Chloe's case. The man who had interviewed Amanda. The man who had comforted Chloe's parents and promised the town he would find the monster. He wasn't the monster. He was the monster's accomplice. Or maybe, he was the monster himself. Before Amanda could process the catastrophic weight of the revelation, the silence of the house was violently shattered. Creak. It wasn't the wind, it was the distinct, heavy sound of a floorboard compressing under the weight of a human foot. And it came from the bottom of the stairs. Someone was inside the house. Amanda didn't gasp. She didn't drop the diary. In one fluid, silent motion, she shoved the blue book into the cargo pocket of her tactical pants and drew her Glock 19. She clicked off the weapon light, plunging the room back into the murky gloom of twilight. Vance. Amanda breathed into her comms, her voice barely a vibration in her throat. I have company. First floor. Static. Vance. Do you copy? Nothing. The earpiece was dead. It wasn't a jammer this time, there was no white noise. The signal had been cleanly, surgically cut. Amanda moved to the doorway of Chloe's bedroom, flattening her back against the faded wallpaper. She peered through the crack in the doorframe, down the dark hallway toward the top of the stairs. Thump. Pause. Thump. The footsteps were agonizingly slow, deliberate, and entirely unbothered by the noise they were making. Whoever it was, they knew she was up here. They were hunting her. Amanda slipped her combat knife from her ankle sheath, holding it in a reverse grip in her left hand, her pistol steady in her right. If it was a team, she would need to funnel them in the doorway. If it was a single target, she would take them on the landing. A shadow fell across the top of the stairs, blocking out the faint ambient light from the first-floor windows. A figure stepped onto the landing. He was tall, wearing a heavy, dark overcoat. In his right hand, he carried a massive, customized revolver, a Smith & Wesson Model 500, a hand cannon capable of shooting through engine blocks, let alone rotted drywall. He didn't raise the weapon. He just stood there in the gloom, looking directly at the closed door of Chloe's room. I always knew you'd come back here, Amanda. A voice rasped. It wasn't distorted by a computer program this time. It was real, hoarse, aged by cigarettes and time, but undeniably familiar. Amanda stepped out of the bedroom, her Glock raised, the tritium night sights glowing faintly green, centered directly on the man's chest. Drop the weapon, Chief Miller, Amanda commanded, her voice slicing through the heavy, dusty air like a razor. The old man stepped forward, the dying light catching the deep wrinkles of his face and the cold, dead water eyes Chloe had described 20 years ago. Former police chief Arthur Miller smiled, a thin, horrifying stretch of lips. I can't do that, Mandy, Miller whispered, cocking the heavy hammer of the hand cannon. We have a lot of catching up to do. A Smith & Wesson Model 500 is not a sidearm, it is a handheld artillery piece. It fires a half-inch chunk of lead with enough kinetic energy to stop a charging grizzly bear. At a distance of 15 feet, down a narrow, rotting hallway, it didn't matter if Amanda was wearing level 4 ceramic body armor. If Arthur Miller pulled that trigger, the round would punch through her chest plate, through her spine, and through the exterior wall of the house behind her. Amanda didn't look at the massive barrel of the gun. She kept her eyes locked exactly on the bridge of Miller's nose, the ocular window. I said drop it, Arthur, Amanda repeated. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't shake. It was the calm, flat tone of a drone strike counting down to 0. Miller let out a wet, rattling cough that sounded like sandpaper rubbing against dry leather. He leaned heavily against the doorframe of the master bedroom. the heavy revolver remarkably steady in his spotted, trembling hand. "You always were a stubborn kid, Mandy," Miller rasped, a sickeningly grandfatherly smile twisting his lips. "Even back then, sitting in my office, kicking your feet in the chair, refusing to believe your little friend just ran away. I should have known you wouldn't let it go. Keep him talking." It was rule number 1 in a standoff. Every second he spent talking was a second his adrenaline spiked and his muscles fatigued under the weight of that massive gun. "What was in the trunk, Arthur?" Amanda asked, slowly shifting her weight to the balls of her feet, preparing for lateral movement. "Chloe wrote it down. She saw what you had in the back of your cruiser down by the creek." Miller's smile vanished, replaced by a cold, hollow stare. "A mistake. That's what was in the trunk. A local girl from the county overdose. I was doing a favor for a very wealthy, very influential family in Albany, disposing of a problem before it ruined a politician's career. It was business, Amanda. Just business." The sheer, sociopathic apathy in his voice made Amanda's blood run colder than the autumn wind howling outside the broken windows. "But Chloe was down by the creek." Amanda pieced it together, her tactical mind processing the timeline. "She was waiting for me. And she saw you open the trunk." "She saw the body," Miller corrected grimly. "A 12-year-old girl with a loud mouth and an active imagination. I couldn't risk it. I couldn't let her run home and tell her parents she saw Chief Miller dumping a dead girl in the quarry. So, I took her instead." Amanda's finger applied exactly 3 pounds of pressure to the 4-pound trigger of her Glock. "And my mother? Eleanor was driving past the creek access road looking for you." Miller sneered. "She saw me put Chloe in the back of the cruiser. Chloe was crying. Eleanor asked questions. I simply explained to your mother the consequences of her speaking up. I told her if she opened her mouth, you would be the next one I took for a ride. She was a practical woman. Your mother, she chose her flesh and blood." The monstrous truth hung in the dusty air. Chloe hadn't been taken by a boogeyman in the woods. She had been executed by the town's protector to cover up a political favor. While Amanda's own mother was forced into a 20-year vow of silence to keep her alive. "You sent the necklace," Amanda said, her voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "You set the trap at the quarry. You sent the shooter to the cemetery." Miller's brow furrowed, a flash of genuine confusion crossing his aged features. "Sent you the necklace? Amanda, I've spent the last 20 years praying you'd never come back. I didn't send you a damn thing." Amanda's eyes narrowed. "He's not lying. In the intelligence world, you learn to read micro-expressions." The confusion was real. "Then who set the comms jammer? Who lured me here?" Amanda demanded. "I didn't lure you here." "He did," Miller spat, his voice rising in panic. "The guy on the phone. He called me an hour ago. Modulated voice. Said you dug up the cemetery. Said you were coming to the Evans house to find the diary and expose me. He told me if I didn't come here and put a bullet in your head, he was going to leak the files to the feds." A chilling realization washed over Amanda. X wasn't Miller. X was someone else. Someone who knew everything that happened 20 years ago. Someone who was playing Amanda and Miller against each other. X had led Amanda to the diary, knowing she would find the truth about Miller, and simultaneously tipped off Miller to force this exact confrontation. It was a closed-loop execution. X was using Amanda as a weapon to clean up the conspirators. "Amanda," Miller said, his knuckles whitening around the grip of the magnum. "I'm sorry. I really am, but I'm not going to federal prison to die. He tightened his finger on the trigger. Action. Amanda didn't shoot first. The recoil and sound of his gun would cause a sympathetic muscle spasm if she shot him. His finger would reflexively pull the trigger anyway. Instead, her left thumb smashed the pressure pad on her Glock's tactical light. A blinding 1,000 lumen strobe effect erupted in the dark hallway, flashing at a disorienting 15 Hz. In the pitch-black environment, the sudden, violent burst of light completely overwhelmed Miller's dilated pupils. He flinched, throwing his left arm up to shield his eyes, his finger pulling the trigger in blind panic. Boom! The sound was apocalyptic in the confined space. The .500 Magnum round tore past Amanda's right shoulder, missing her ear by inches. The shockwave alone felt like a physical punch to the side of her head. The massive bullet hit the dry wall behind her, obliterating the wooden studs and blowing a hole the size of a basketball straight through the exterior of the house. Amanda was already moving beneath his line of fire. She lunged forward, closing the 15-foot gap in 2 explosive strides. She didn't aim for center mass. He might be wearing a soft vest. She drove her Glock upward, firing a single round directly into Miller's right shoulder socket. Crack! The 9mm hollow point shattered his clavicle. The magnum slipped from his deadened fingers, hitting the floorboards with a heavy thud. Amanda didn't stop. Her combat momentum carried her straight into the old man. She hit him like a freight train, her forearms slamming into his throat, driving him violently backward into the master bedroom. They crashed through the rotted wood of the doorway, collapsing onto the dust-choked floor. Amanda immediately straddled his chest, pinning his uninjured arm with her knee, and pressed the scalding hot suppressor of her Glock directly against his cheekbone. The smell of burning skin and cordite filled the room. Miller screamed, a pathetic, broken sound, thrashing weakly beneath her. "Who is X? Arthur?" Amanda roared, her ears ringing violently from the magnum blast. "Who the hell is playing this game?" "I don't know," Miller sobbed, blood bubbling past his lips. "I swear to God, I don't know who he is. He just knew about the girl in the trunk. He knew about Chloe. He said it was time to balance the scales." Amanda stared down at the broken, bleeding man who had haunted her nightmares for 2 decades. He was a monster, yes, but right now, he was just a terrified old man caught in a much larger spiderweb. Suddenly, the encrypted satellite phone in Amanda's cargo pocket vibrated. The jammer hadn't been turned off. X had specifically allowed a single incoming signal to punch through. Amanda kept the gun pressed to Miller's face with her right hand and slowly drew the phone with her left. The caller ID was a string of zeros. She hit accept and put it on speaker. Impressive CQB techniques. "Mandy." The distorted voice echoed from the phone, the digital modulation failing to hide a tone of dark amusement. "You moved precisely 0.4 seconds before he pulled the trigger. Excellent reaction time. You set him up." Amanda breathed, her eyes locked on the ceiling. "You used me to execute him." "Arthur Miller is a parasite," X replied coldly. "He infected this town. He stole your innocence. I just put the 2 of you in a room. You did the rest. Consider it a gift." "I don't want your gifts. I want you." "Oh, you'll get me, Amanda. But we are in the endgame now. You've uncovered the past. Now, it's time to secure the future." The line went silent for exactly 2 seconds. Then, The modulation dropped entirely. The next voice that came through the speaker wasn't a computer program. It was high, sweet, and trembling with terror. "Mom? Mom, where are you?" Amanda's heart completely stopped. The world around her, the dust, the blood, the groaning floorboards, ceased to exist. It was Sophie. "Uncle Marcus is hurt. Mom, there's a lot of blood. The dogs are asleep and won't wake up. Someone's outside the door," Sophie cried. The sound of heavy metal being pounded in the background transmitting clearly over the line. "Sophie, hide. Get in the safe," Amanda screamed into the phone, her military composure shattering into a million jagged pieces. "Amanda," the distorted voice of X returned, cold and triumphant. "You have exactly 20 minutes to get back to the auto shop. If you're late this time, history repeats itself." The line went dead. Amanda sat frozen on the floor of the rotting house. The tactical operator was gone. The cold, calculating hunter had vanished. In their place was only the primal, raw terror of a mother whose child was in the jaws of the wolf. She looked down at Miller. He was gasping for air, clutching his bleeding shoulder. "Please," Miller begged, his eyes wide. Amanda stood up. She didn't say a word. She didn't shoot him. She just turned her back on the ghost of her past and sprinted toward the stairs. She had 20 minutes to save her entire world. Amanda didn't run down the rotting staircase. She vaulted over the banister, dropping 10 feet directly to the first-floor landing. The impact sent a brutal, jarring shock up her spine. But the pain didn't register. The tactical operator who had methodically cleared this house 5 minutes ago was dead. The mother had taken the wheel. She burst through the splintered back door, her boots tearing into the overgrown grass of the backyard. She covered the 2 blocks to where she had hidden the Tahoe in less than 90 seconds. Her lungs burning, her mind entirely consumed by the sound of Sophie's terrified voice. "Hide. Get in the safe." She reached the massive black SUV, ripping the door open and throwing herself into the driver's seat. She didn't bother with the seatbelt. She slammed the key into the ignition. The V8 engine roared to life with a ferocious, metallic scream. 20 minutes. Under normal traffic conditions, the drive from the Willow Creek subdivision to Vance Custom Auto and Salvage took 25. Amanda threw the transmission into drive and floored the accelerator. The Tahoe fishtail-ed violently on the loose gravel, the heavy rear tires kicking up a storm of dirt before biting into the asphalt. She didn't use the brake as she hit the first intersection. She laid on the horn, blasting through a red light at 60 miles per hour. A commuter sedan swerved, missing her rear bumper by inches, laying on its own horn in a futile protest. "You were late." The words written on the back of the Polaroid echoed in her mind, syncing perfectly with the thundering pistons of the engine. 20 years ago, she had been 10 minutes late to the creek. She had lost Chloe. She had spent a lifetime building an impenetrable fortress of military training and lethal skills just to ensure she would never be late again. She was not going to lose Sophie. She would burn Elmwood to the ground first. The speedometer needle climbed past 80. The suburban streets were a blur of manicured lawns and fading autumn light. Amanda kept her left hand clamped onto the steering wheel, her right hand resting on her thigh, fingers twitching. "Vance!" Amanda barked into the radio on the dashboard, hoping the jammer at the house hadn't fried the truck's comms. "Marcus, do you copy? What is your status?" "Static. Nothing but the dead, agonizing hiss of an empty frequency." She hit the main arterial road. Route 9. Traffic was heavy, the evening commute was in full swing. A wall of taillights stretched out before her. Amanda didn't hesitate. She jerked the steering wheel hard to the left, jumping the raised concrete median. The Tahoe's reinforced suspension absorbed the impact as the heavy vehicle landed in the oncoming lanes. Headlights flashed frantically. Horns blared. Drivers swerved off the road, crashing into mailboxes and ditches as the massive, black SUV tore through the wrong side of traffic like a guided missile. 15 minutes. She pushed the engine to its absolute limit, the RPM gauge dancing in the red zone. The Tahoe was a battering ram, and Amanda was the tip of the spear. She took the exit for the industrial district at 85 miles per hour. The tires shrieking in protest, smoking as they fought for traction on the sharp curve. The landscape shifted from residential homes to concrete warehouses, rusted chain-link fences, and scrapyards. 10 minutes. She could see the massive, illuminated sign for Vance Custom Auto half a mile down the road. But something was wrong. There was no smoke, there were no sirens, but the heavy, reinforced steel gates that usually locked down the perimeter were standing wide open. Amanda didn't slow down. She drove the Tahoe straight through the open gates, slamming on the brakes only when she reached the main garage doors. The vehicle skidded to a violent halt, the smell of burning rubber filling the air. She kicked the door open, her Glock 19 already drawn and leveled. The security lights in the yard had been shot out. The silence was deafening. There was no barking from Marcus's usually ferocious junkyard dogs. Amanda moved tactically now, her training bleeding back into her panic. She approached the side entrance of the garage. The heavy metal door had been breached, the locking mechanism completely blown out by a shaped breaching charge. The edges of the metal were still smoking. "Marcus!" Amanda yelled, slicing the pie around the doorframe and stepping into the dark, cavernous garage. The beam of her weapon light cut through the gloom. The first thing she saw was one of the dogs, Brutus, lying on the concrete. He wasn't dead. His chest was rising and falling in a slow, unnatural rhythm. A dart with a bright orange tail stuck out of his flank. Animal tranquilizers. Heavy dose. She kept moving toward the back office. The reinforced glass window was shattered. "Marcus," she called out again, her voice cracking. She rounded the corner into the office. The room was a disaster zone. File cabinets were overturned, tools were scattered, and the air smelled heavily of CS gas and copper. Marcus Vance, the giant Force Recon Marine, was slumped against the wall beneath the desk. His custom M4 carbine was empty, the bolt locked back, lying on the floor next to a pool of his own blood. He had taken 3 rounds to the chest plate, the ceramic had shattered, and 1 round to the left shoulder, which was bleeding profusely. Amanda dropped to her knees beside him, her hands instinctively going to his neck to check the pulse. It was weak, but rapid. "Vance, hey, stay with me," Amanda ordered, pressing her hand hard over the gunshot wound in his shoulder to staunch the bleeding. Marcus coughed, a wet, agonizing sound. His eyes fluttered open, struggling to focus on her face. "Brooks," he wheezed, his voice barely a whisper. "Professionals, 4 of them, hit the power, dropped tear gas through the vents." "Where is she, Marcus? Where is Sophie?" Amanda demanded, her heart shattering inside her chest. "I tried. Amanda, I'm sorry." Marcus groaned, his head lolling to the side. "They blew the safe. They took her. Amanda looked up. The massive, biometric steel safe in the corner of the room, the one Sophie was supposed to hide in, had been blown wide open. The thick steel door hung on a single, mangled hinge. The safe was empty. But resting perfectly in the center of the debris on the floor was the small, orange barn kitten Sophie had named Tactical. It was shivering, but unharmed, and tied around the kitten's neck was a faded pink lanyard. Amanda let go of Marcus's shoulder just long enough to grab the lanyard. Attached to it wasn't a key. It was a digital pager. The screen illuminated in the dark office, displaying a single line of text and a GPS coordinate. "You were late. Come to the water. Alone." Amanda stared at the glowing green letters. The panic vanished. The terror evaporated. Everything inside her went completely, chillingly numb. The mother had failed to protect her child. Now, there was nothing left but the monster the military had created. She reached for her radio, switching it to the local emergency frequency. "Elmwood Dispatch. This is a priority medical emergency at Vance Custom Auto. Officer down. Multiple gunshot wounds. Severe bleeding. Send EMS immediately." She tossed the radio aside, not waiting for a response. She looked down at Marcus. "They're coming, brother," Amanda whispered, her eyes dead and cold. She stood up, checking the magazine of her Glock, slamming it back into the grip. She didn't have 20 minutes anymore. She had the rest of her life to kill whoever was at those coordinates. And she was going to make it hurt. The wail of approaching sirens bled through the shattered windows of the auto shop. Elmwood EMS was less than 2 minutes out. Amanda didn't wait to greet them. Marcus was bleeding, but he was a Force Recon Marine. He had survived worse in the Quarengal Valley. Sophie, however, was in the hands of ghosts. Amanda stepped over the debris in the office, moving toward the heavy, reinforced steel locker bolted to the back wall. Marcus's private armory. The biometric scanner had been damaged by the blast, so Amanda didn't try to scan her fingerprint. She raised her Glock and put 2 rounds directly into the electronic locking mechanism, kicking the heavy steel door open. The mother who baked toast and checked math homework was gone. In her place was an apex predator, cold and absolute. She stripped off her torn, blood-stained jacket and strapped on a black tactical plate carrier equipped with level 4 ceramic inserts. She bypassed the handguns and reached for the heavy artillery, a heavily modified Heckler & Koch HK-416 assault rifle. She locked a 30-round magazine of 5.56 mm armor-piercing ammunition into the mag well, racked the charging handle, and slung the weapon across her chest. She loaded her tactical belt with 4 spare magazines, 2 M84 flashbang grenades, and her fixed-blade combat knife. She walked out of the garage just as the red and blue lights of the ambulance washed over the industrial yard. She didn't look back. She slipped into the shadows, disappearing into the tree line behind the shop before the paramedics even put the vehicle in park. The GPS coordinates on the pager didn't point to a house or a cemetery. They pointed to the northern edge of the county, to a colossal structure of concrete and rusted steel that had been decommissioned in the late 90s, the Elmwood Hydroelectric Dam. Amanda didn't take the Tahoe. It was a massive, recognizable thermal signature. Instead, she stole Marcus's matte black dirt bike from the salvage yard, keeping the headlight killed and navigating purely by the ambient light of the moon. The weather had turned. A cold, biting autumn rain began to fall, turning the dirt roads into slick mud. The icy water lashed against Amanda's face, washing away the ash and blood from the Evans house, leaving only a mask of pure, unadulterated resolve. 20 minutes later, the colossal silhouette of the dam loomed out of the darkness. It was a staggering monument to human engineering. Built across a deep, jagged gorge, the water from the reservoir spilled over the top edge in a violent, deafening roar, plunging 300 feet into the rocky basin below. The sound was so absolute it vibrated in Amanda's teeth. It was the perfect place for a murder. No one would hear a gunshot. No one would hear a scream. Amanda ditched the bike a half-mile out and approached on foot. She pulled her night vision goggles down over her eyes. The world shifted into a sharp, luminescent green. The perimeter was secured by professionals. 2 heavily armed mercenaries in slick waterproof gear were patrolling the western access road, holding suppressed MP5 submachine guns. They were moving in a disciplined, overlapping formation. Amanda didn't hesitate. She didn't issue warnings. This wasn't a police operation. This was a hostage rescue with extreme prejudice. She flanked them, using the roaring sound of the spillway to mask her approach. She moved through the wet underbrush like a shadow. As the trailing guard turned his head to check his 6 o'clock, Amanda rose from the darkness behind him. She clamped her left hand over his mouth, violently jerking his head back, and drove her combat knife perfectly into the gap between his helmet and his Kevlar collar. She severed his spinal cord in a fraction of a second. He went entirely limp. She didn't let him drop. She lowered his body silently to the mud, instantly raising her HK-416 with her right hand. The lead guard, 10 yards ahead, stopped. His instincts flared. He began to turn. Peefed. Amanda put 2 suppressed 5.56 rounds directly through the back of his helmet. He collapsed onto the gravel without making a sound. She stepped over the bodies, her heart rate sitting at a frighteningly steady 60 beats per minute. She breached the exterior maintenance door of the dam, stepping into the cavernous, dripping concrete corridors of the facility. The air inside smelled of ozone, rust, and damp earth. The GPS beacon blinked furiously on her wrist. The signal was coming from the very top of the structure, the central catwalk suspended directly over the main spillway. Amanda climbed the rusted metal service stairs, clearing each landing with meticulous, lethal precision. 2 more guards attempted to intercept her on the 3rd level. They died before they could even raise their weapons, cut down by a relentless, surgically accurate burst of rifle fire. She reached the heavy iron doors leading out to the catwalk. The roar of the water outside was apocalyptic. Amanda kicked the doors open, raising her rifle, stepping out into the freezing rain and the howling wind. The catwalk was a narrow bridge of industrial steel grating hanging 300 feet above the churning abyss. And there, in the dead center of the bridge, illuminated by a single, blinding halogen work light, was a metal folding chair. Sophie was tied to it. Her small hands were bound with thick zip ties. Her clothes soaked from the rain. She was crying, her face pale with terror. But what stopped Amanda's heart wasn't just the bindings. It was the heavy canvas vest strapped to her daughter's chest. A vest lined with blocks of C4 explosive, wired to a blinking red receiver. "Mom!" Sophie screamed, her voice barely carrying over the roar of the dam. "I'm here. Bug, do not move," Amanda yelled back, her rifle scanning the darkness just beyond the halo of the work light. I have to admit, Operator Brooks, you exceeded my expectations. The voice came from the shadows at the far end of the catwalk. A man stepped forward into the rain. He wasn't wearing tactical gear. He wore a tailored, water-resistant trench coat. He was in his late 50s, with graying hair and a face carved by years of profound, rotting grief. In his right hand, he held a dead man's switch, a small, black trigger. If he let go, the C4 on Sophie's chest would detonate, instantly vaporizing the catwalk and everyone on it. "Drop the rifle, Amanda," the man ordered, his voice echoing through a small bullhorn. "Or the little girl disappears. Just like mine did." Amanda's eyes locked onto his face. She didn't know his name, but she knew exactly who he was. The missing piece of the puzzle. "The girl in the trunk," Amanda yelled over the wind, keeping the crosshairs of her HK-416 dead center on his forehead. "The overdose Chief Miller covered up 20 years ago. She was your daughter. Her name was Sarah," the man roared, his composure cracking, raw agony bleeding into the freezing air. "She was 18 years old. She made a mistake at a college party. But the boy who gave her the drugs was the son of a state senator. So Miller threw my little girl into the Blackridge quarry like a piece of trash to protect a political campaign." Amanda didn't lower her weapon. "And you think killing my daughter balances the scales? Your mother watched Miller kidnap a 12-year-old girl to cover up Sarah's murder. And she said nothing," he screamed, tears mixing with the rain on his face. "This whole town knew something was wrong. And they all looked the other way. I spent 20 years gathering the money, the resources, and the mercenaries to burn Elmwood to the ground. I used you to kill Miller. I used you to expose the rot. And now, I'm going to make you feel exactly what I felt." His thumb hovered over the dead man's switch. "Drop the gun, Amanda, or I let go." Amanda stood on the edge of the abyss, the cold rain soaking through her gear. The math was impossible. If she shot him, his hand would relax, the switch would disengage, and Sophie would die. If she dropped her weapon, he would kill them both anyway. She looked at Sophie, the terrified 8-year-old girl with the missing front teeth and the fierce intellect. "I will burn the world down before I let the dark touch you." Amanda slowly lowered the barrel of the HK-416. But she didn't drop it. "You're right," Amanda said, her voice dropping into a deadly, calculating resonance that cut through the sound of the roaring water. "The town looked the other way. My mother lied. Miller was a monster." She unclipped the sling, letting the heavy assault rifle clatter onto the steel grating of the catwalk. She raised both hands, her palms open to the rain. "But you made one fatal miscalculation. Amanda whispered. "And what is that?" he scoffed, his thumb trembling on the detonator. Amanda's hazel eyes turned completely black, void of any human mercy. "You assumed you were the only one holding a detonator." The rain drove down in icy, diagonal sheets, hissing against the hot halogen work light that illuminated the catwalk. Below them, the roaring abyss of the hydroelectric dam demanded a blood sacrifice. "What are you talking about?" X demanded, his voice cracking through the bullhorn. His thumb trembled against the black plastic of the dead man's switch. The absolute certainty he had held for 20 years was suddenly fracturing. Amanda stood perfectly still, her hands raised, the heavy HK-416 assault rifle lying uselessly at her feet. She didn't look at the gun. She kept her eyes locked on X. C4 is a fascinating compound. Amanda yelled over the roar of the water, her voice completely devoid of panic. "It's highly stable. You can drop it, freeze it, even set it on fire. And it won't blow. It needs a very specific, localized electrical charge to detonate. Like the tripwired trap your mercenary set for me at the quarry." She slowly, deliberately reached 2 fingers into the upper pocket of her tactical plate carrier. "Don't move," X screamed, stepping back, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the switch. "I'll let go. I swear to God, I'll let go." "No, you won't," Amanda stated with chilling authority. "Because your daughter's death was a tragedy of circumstance. But if you blow up an 8-year-old girl, you become the exact same monster who threw Sarah into that quarry. And you know it." She pulled her hand from her pocket. Pinched between her fingers was a small, black electronic fob, the remote detonator she had stripped from the tripwire. X stared at it, the rain plastering his gray hair to his forehead. "You're bluffing. You didn't have time to wire this catwalk." "I didn't wire the catwalk," Amanda said, her hazel eyes turning into chips of dark ice. "I wired the primary generator powering the floodlights. Because I know something you don't. I spent 10 years fighting in the darkest corners of the earth. You merely adopted the dark. I was forged in it." Amanda pressed the button. 200 yards behind X at the edge of the access road. A massive, concussive boom ripped through the night. A fireball of orange and black violently erupted into the sky, instantly shattering the primary transformer bank. The single halogen work light on the catwalk exploded in a shower of sparks. The dam was plunged into absolute, suffocating darkness. X screamed in sudden, blinding panic. The human startle response is an involuntary reflex when a loud explosion occurs. The brain commands the muscles to contract, not relax. X didn't drop the switch. He gripped it tighter, his eyes wide and useless in the pitch black. But Amanda wasn't blind. The millisecond the lights went out, she snapped her night vision goggles down over her eyes. The world washed into sharp, luminescent green. She didn't run. Running makes noise. She moved with the terrifying, silent speed of a phantom, crossing the 30 feet of steel grating in exactly 2.4 seconds. X was wildly waving his free hand in the dark, trying to find his bearings. "Stay back, I'll do it." Amanda slid under his extended arm. Her left hand shot upward like a striking viper, clamping down over his right hand with crushing, bone-breaking force. She pinned his thumb irrevocably down onto the dead man's switch, ensuring the circuit remained closed. X gasped, feeling the sudden, iron grip in the darkness. But before he could struggle, Amanda drove her right hand, holding her combat knife, deep into the soft tissue of his shoulder, pinning him against the heavy steel railing of the catwalk. "It's over," Amanda whispered directly into his ear, her voice a terrifying rasp over the roaring water below. "Sarah wouldn't want this, and neither do you. Let it end." X froze. The fight drained out of him in a massive, shuddering breath. The 20 years of rage, grief, and meticulous planning collapsed under the weight of a mother's unyielding will. He slumped against the railing, sobbing into the freezing rain, his hand going completely limp beneath Amanda's crushing grip. "I've got you, Bug. I'm right here," Amanda said, never letting go of the switch. "Mom," Sophie whimpered in the dark, shivering violently in the cold. With surgical precision, Amanda used the edge of her knife to slice through the thick nylon straps holding the C4 vest to Sophie's chest. The heavy canvas fell away. Clattering onto the grating, she kicked it over the edge of the catwalk. It tumbled down into the roaring white water, disappearing into the abyss. Only then did Amanda rip the detonator from X's hand and hurl it over the edge after the vest. She holstered her knife, dropped to her knees, and pulled Sophie into a crushing embrace. She buried her face in her daughter's wet hair. The tactical operator finally, completely giving way to the mother. Amanda Brooks, the woman who hadn't shed a tear since she was 12 years old, wept. "I've got you," Amanda choked out. "I've got you." The aftermath of a war is never quiet. It is filled with the flashing lights of emergency vehicles, the crackle of police radios, and the sterile smell of ambulances. By dawn, the Elmwood hydroelectric dam was crawling with FBI agents, state police, and hazmat teams. The local Elmwood PD had been entirely sidelined. Amanda sat on the bumper of an ambulance, a heavy wool blanket draped over her and Sophie. Sophie was asleep, exhausted, clutching the orange kitten, Tactical, who had been rescued from the auto shop by the paramedics. An FBI special agent approached, holding a tablet. "Ms. Brooks, we've secured the suspect, and we found the diary you mentioned at the Evans house. Along with Chief Miller, he's in custody, recovering from the gunshot wound. The evidence, it's all there. The cover-up, the blackmail. The Department of Justice is taking over the entire town's administration." "And Vance?" Amanda asked, her voice raspy. The agent offered a small, reassuring smile. "Out of surgery an hour ago. He's tough as nails. The doctors say he'll be swearing at the nurses by tomorrow morning." Amanda nodded, looking out over the town of Elmwood as the morning sun broke through the heavy storm clouds. The golden light washed over the streets, casting away the shadows that had clung to this place for 2 decades. The truth was finally out. Chloe's memory was no longer a ghost haunting a creek bed. It was a testament to survival. Sarah's tragic death would no longer be a dirty secret buried in a quarry. The town would have to face its sins. But Amanda wouldn't be here to watch it burn. Her war was over. "Mom?" Sophie mumbled, stirring awake under the blanket. She looked up, her hazel eyes reflecting the morning light. "Are we going home?" Amanda looked at the town that had taken everything from her, and then down at the little girl who had given it all back. She pulled the blanket tighter around them both. "No, Bug," Amanda said softly, a genuine, unburdened smile touching her lips for the first time in 20 years. "We're going to go find a new one."